Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am so glad to be back. Again, I was traveling. I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, we have not been streaming enough lately, and I am so glad to be back. So here, let's put on the opening music and we'll do our thing. It's so good to see you all, and I'm looking forward to filling you all in on everything. So here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Great things are happening, and our country's in a weird place right now. No question about it. And I was just traveling, and I've got loads and loads to say about it. But glad to be back. And we're gonna do our usual thing. We're gonna talk about everything we always talk about on these streams. Anti-imperialism and all that good stuff. And yeah, we're going to do all of that. So hold on, just want to pull up. I made a list of things to talk about tonight because it's like so much has happened. I've actually made a list. Can you believe it or not? I don't normally do that, but I've got like a list to check off to make sure I don't miss anything, because tonight was like, while I was gone, it was a lot of different things. I'd have to figure out which notebook I wrote my list in. Now I'm having trouble finding my list. Can you believe it? I just sat down and wrote my list, and now I don't know where I put my list. So I hope I remember it all. It might be in my other notebook. Let me just, that's how these things go. But I'm really glad to be back, y'all. These streams, we are a community here, and I know you all have missed me. I've gotten all your messages, and I've missed you too. And I've been on the road, and it was quite a trip, and it was not fun for me, honestly. Sometimes in the past, I would have enjoyed something like this, but the way our politics have developed, not so much anymore. And I'll tell you more about that. But anyhow, yeah, if I can just find this list I sat there and I made a list of, here we go. All right, I found my list. All right, very good. Thanks for your patience, everybody. All right, so we're going to be following our usual format tonight, which is first my opening remarks, followed by the roll call, and then I will answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if you have something you would like to talk to me about in the second half of the program, you can send questions via Rumble Rants on the Rumble. You can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way to send your questions, buy me a coffee. Boom. Buy me a coffee is the best way. Please buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. So if you got something for the second half of the show, go to Buy Me a Coffee, Caleb Moppin, send your question. There were a few questions that came in while I was away, and I will answer those first. Those will be the first ones answered. So as far as announcements, join the Center for Political Innovation. Our convention this year is going to be in the Chicago area. It'll be on August 15th, and we're going to have the 7-day program. If you're, a member and you want to get engaged with other members and spend some time getting to know people, August 12th through August 19th, that'll be this summer that we have the convention. So the convention, the surrounding activities, it was a great success last year, and we're going to build on that success and have another national gathering this year. So if you want to come to the 7-day program, you need to join the organization. The convention is it's a public thing, and we'll be building for that. So mark your calendar for August 15th in the Chicago area. And if you would like to be part of this community, and if you are a CPI member, mark your calendar for August 12th through August 19th, because we're going to spend a week together getting to know each other and engaging in anti-imperialist education and activism. So mark your calendar for that. But as I said tonight, You can send questions 3 ways. We'll first do opening remarks, then the roll call, then I'll answer questions. You can Rumble rant me on the Rumble. You can Cash at me at Caleb Moppin 22. But please, the best way is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way. All right, folks. Before I get to my recent trip to Minnesota, I have to fill you in on a very, very great development, something that happened that we should all be rejoicing over, which is the Uhuru defendants, Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, the leaders of the Uhuru movement, who were indicted for being agents of Russia and had their homes raided by the FBI. We've done everything we can. They have been released from probation. They were acquitted on the main charge of being Russian agents. They were found guilty of conspiracy to defraud the American government, which is absurd. And the judge gave them no jail time, and he gave them no fines, and they were sentenced to a couple of years of probation. Yesterday, there was a huge victory in that the judge released them from probation. They were supposed to be on probation for a couple of years. He said, you know what? You're released from probation. So as of now, they're completely released from any penalty. No fines, no jail time. Now they've been released from probation, and they're expecting the conviction will be overturned and voided in the Court of Appeal. And that's a great development. Look, the U.S. government was prepared to throw these 3 anti-imperialist Black liberation activists in prison for 15 years for their speech about Russia. And if it hadn't been for all the hard work that people like the Center for Political Innovation, like Tara Reid, and others, I mean, so many people, just decided this will not pass. They cannot make it illegal to be an anti-imperialist activist. And I was out in front of the federal courthouse. John McCarthy from CPI did so much. And we had a press conference at the United Nations. I raised the case with the Russian president. We organized many events. We made a short documentary about the case that Peter Coffin, made, which is very, very good, Money in American Injustice. And we did everything we could. And it appears that they're now free from probation. That's a huge victory. I'm looking forward to their entire case being overturned. The guys at Due Dissidence, which is a great anti-imperialist podcast, Keaton and Russell, they're actually making a documentary film about the Uhuru case, which I'm very excited about. I can't wait to see how that turns out. And we're looking forward to seeing the entire conviction be voided. So, dare to struggle, dare to win, everybody. That was a great victory. It was a great victory. And I'll probably talk more about that later. So where have I been? I have been in Minnesota, the U.S. state in the northeast of America, or the middle west of America, you could call it, right? It's not the East Coast. It's not by the ocean. Past the Great Lakes, in the center of America, right south of Canada, you've got Wisconsin, and then you've got Minnesota. I think you got Minnesota first, right next to Lake Michigan and all of that. Then you got Wisconsin. Minnesota, all right? I was in Minnesota. Why was I in Minnesota? I was there because there were 2 deaths of protesters at the hands of Immigration Customs Enforcement. Renee Good was shot and killed by ICE. 2 weeks later, Alex Pretty was shot and killed by ICE. And it was murder. I mean, there was no reason to kill him. He may have had a gun on him, but he didn't have it out. He didn't have it in his hand. And they didn't shoot him once. Right? If they feared for their lives because this guy had a gun, or some people say maybe the gun went off when he was disarmed and they were confused or whatever. If you watch the video, it's not exactly clear what started them, but they didn't shoot him once. They shot him 10 times, right? After he'd already had his gun taken away, they shot him, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, but there is much more to the story than this, And I do want to say that I am not a fan of ICE, and I don't think that we should be supporting ICE. And I will tell you in detail about what ICE is up to in Minnesota. However, I got to tell you, the anti-ICE movement is not leading any place good either. I mean, there are maybe some minor positives that come out of it, but it's not leading any place good either. And that really the story of what's happening in Minneapolis is much more complicated. If you watch American TV, if you look at American social media, generally the version of events we get is that Donald Trump is a big, mean racist who hates immigrants. And he has this big, mean, scary fighting force, called ICE that is terrorizing people and being very heavy-handed and ruthless and getting rid of immigrants. And if you're a conservative, people say, well, that's good. ICE is going after criminal aliens, and ICE is getting rid of people that are in this country illegally, enforcing immigration law. If you're a liberal, Donald Trump is the next Hitler. And neither of those narratives are true. They all have elements of truth in them, but neither of those narratives are really, really true. I'm going to tell you what's actually happening in Minneapolis, right? Minneapolis is an American city in the heartland of America. And Minneapolis, it's got an African-American community that's been there really since the what they call the Great Migration of the 1950s. After World War II, a lot of Black people moved there to get jobs in industry. There was a Teamsters strike there in 1934 that was a key moment in American labor. Trotskyites infiltrated the Teamsters Union, and they shut down the city, make Minneapolis a union town in 1934. It's an industrial or formerly industrial city in the heartland of America. That's what it is. Now, in the last decade, there has been a huge inflow of people to Minnesota from one particular country. And you would think now, okay, well, where do immigrants from the United States generally come from? Not really Canada. Canadians don't really want to be Americans, but Mexico, it's not Mexicans. There's been a huge inflow. Where are these people from? Central America, Honduras, Guatemala? Nope, wrong. There's been a huge inflow of immigrants from one particular country, and that country is Somalia. Now, why in the world are loads and loads of people from Somalia coming to Minneapolis? That doesn't make any sense. It's like they're not getting on boats in Somalia and paddling over here in boats, right? These are not boat people. And they're not undocumented immigrants. They're here legally, right? They've got visas, and a lot of them have citizenship. Folks, there are now, check out this number, 80,000 Somalis in Minneapolis. 80,000. Do you know how many people that is? That is not a small number. So 80,000 people from Somalia have come to one particular city in the heartland of America. Now, that's interesting. In and of itself, that's interesting, right? We have immigrant communities in America, right? But they tend to be much more spread out, right? We've got people from all parts of the world in America. But 80,000 people from one African country have set up shop in one city in America. That's strange in and of itself. It gets more interesting, right? Has anything been going on in Somalia lately? Well, Israel just declared Somaliland, a big chunk of Somalia, to be independent. Somalia is just across the Gulf of Aden from Yemen, a country that the United States is mad at, and a country that's been doing more than any other country to support the Palestinians with Ansar Allah and the Houthis and all of that. Also, so you got 80,000 people that have moved to Minnesota, 80,000 in one single state, one single city area, basically, right? They're not all in Minneapolis properly, but in that area, you've got 80,000 people, right? There's a giant apartment complex they call Little Mogadishu, which I went to, I saw it, right? 80,000 people are here, and they're not undocumented. They are not illegal immigrants. These are legal immigrants. They have visas, and they're here, and in December, the U.S. government discovered, I mean, it was known for a long time, but they decided to make it go viral. Conservative media made it go viral, and federal prosecutors announced that over $9 billion of fraud was going on. Right? Over $9 billion of fraud. And there were daycare centers that didn't have kids in them. And in fact, they didn't even spell the name right. It was, instead of the Learning Center, they forgot the N. So it was the Leering Center. And there were healthcare clinics that were set up. They arranged for people to get government funding to set up healthcare clinics, and there was no healthcare going on. $9 billion of taxpayer money was stolen in one particular city by people from one particular country. And this is totally real. And don't pretend otherwise, because as soon as they announced this, Governor Tim Walz, who was Kamala Harris's running mate in the presidential election, as soon as this hit the news, he said, "I'm not running for another term." They have arrested a whole bunch of people, right? And, you know, the conservative media, yes, I know conservative media can do dumb shit sometimes. But I have spoken to a number of people on the ground. It is totally lit. There were loads of, daycares and educational facilities and childcare facilities that weren't real. And where was that money going? Right? Now, this is not to say, and please do not misinterpret what I'm saying here. I have nothing against immigrants. I have nothing against people from Somalia. I have nothing against people from the African continent. But this is deep state shit, okay? There's a very, very strategic country on the Horn of Africa, and the U.S. government is known to bribe people with visas. You know that, right? That is, the green card is soft power if there ever was such a thing, right? People do the dirty work of America in the Middle East, in Latin America, and they get visas. They even have green card soldiers now. They have a program where the U.S. Army recruits people. You can get your green card if you enlist in the U.S. military in one of these countries, go and fight or, get stationed somewhere and occupy some country for the U.S. Army. And after your term in the U.S. Army is up, then they give you a green card. Right? Bribing people with visas, getting people from third world countries and giving them the promise of the American dream. That is something the American government has been doing for decades, right? And it's actually connected to a lot of terrorist attacks. Now, there's no terrorism linked to these Somali people that I'm aware of. So please don't misinterpret this. But, the Tsarnaev brothers who blew up the Boston Marathon, their parents were Chechens, Chechen Islamic separatists who were trying to break Chechnya away from Russia. And their parents got visas from the American government because they were working to work against Russia, and they came to the United States. And then their kids blew up the Boston Marathon. And Omar Mateen, right, the Pulse nightclub shooter, his dad was an Afghan who worked with the American government to fight the Soviet Union, to fight against Russia and the Soviet Union in the 1980s. And he got a visa as a reward for doing America's dirty work. And he came over here and his son shot up the Pulse nightclub. And that all over the world, the CIA bribes people with visas. If you do America's dirty work, and this is openly discussed, this is not a conspiracy theory. When Trump enacted his so-called Muslim ban in his first term, the people who opposed it, they all said, "Oh, this guy in Iraq risked his life for America. He should get a visa." Well, that's probably why he did it. That's probably why he risked his life for America. And they said it openly in American media. All these people around the world help the United States, do favors, serve the American foreign policy apparatus. They deserve to have visas. That was their objection to the Muslim ban. It's pretty obvious. Now, Minneapolis has really changed as a result of 80,000 people from one particular country coming there. And it appears $9 billion of fraud. And where did this money go? I mean, obviously, some of it was pilfered and put into people's pockets, but some of it may have gone back to Somalia for, off the books intelligence operations. And like I said, Israel just declared a big chunk of Somalia to be a separate country. And the USA has military forces and drone strikes in Somalia. And China's only overseas military base is also on the Horn of Africa in the country of Djibouti. So it's a contested area. There's something going on there. Okay? There's something going on there. Now, I was out there, and of course, we've all forgotten about that fraud story now. All we're talking about is ICE. ICE is doing awful things. Okay? ICE is doing horrendous things out there. ICE is not there to enforce immigration laws. ICE is there to tear up the neighborhood. It is there to terrorize people. That is, it's clear that there is some deep state on deep state stuff going on. Trump sent ICE, and a section of the American government that does not agree with this policy of bringing Somali people to America, of sending money to whoever this $9 billion went to. Somebody in the American government, a faction of the American deep state, is mad about this policy. And so Trump sent 3,000 agents to Minneapolis, the biggest immigration operation in American history. 3,000 agents were sent to Minneapolis, and everyone's terrified of them. And I went to a church of very conservative Republicans, and they're all terrified. They've told their kids not to go outside. They're all terrified of it. And even though they're Trump supporters, Republicans, they're no, ICE is horrible. Everybody is terrified of ICE. And ICE is making everyone's lives miserable, right? And they search people. It's absolutely horrible. ICE is not there to just enforce immigration laws. Trump and people in Trump's administration are mad at Minneapolis. They're mad at Tim Walz, the governor, who was Kamala Harris's VP. They're mad at the CIA or whoever's been arranging for these Somalis to come here. They're specifically mad at Ilhan Omar because she, to her credit, has stood up against Israel and challenged Israel. And the Somali community, let me add, are Muslims. And they tend to be anti-Israel. And Ilhan Omar, who's a Somali, who's been elected to the U.S. Congress to represent them, has been a very harsh critic of Israel. And this is some deep state on deep state stuff. A section of the American government brought these people here and is funneling money to them. And another section of the American government doesn't agree with that. And so Trump sent ICE to terrorize this area. Right? It's not about enforcing immigration law because these people are all here legally, right? They have visas. It's not about that. It's about punishing Minneapolis, punishing the Somali community, punishing this Democratic Party stronghold, punishing Ilhan Omar. That's what this is about. And look, one thing about ICE, I got to say, every time ICE does something bad, they're going after a child molester. And it's like, every time there's a video of ICE doing something bad or killing somebody or beating up a protester, we were about to go arrest a child rapist trafficker. Every time. They're not doing that. That's what they say, right? Supposedly we're being told that, ICE is only going after convicted criminals who need to be deported. Bullshit. When I was there in Minneapolis, ICE went to a Mexican restaurant, ate at the Mexican restaurant, drove back and said, hey, there might be some undocumented illegal people, went back to the Mexican restaurant, raided the kitchen, arrested the staff and waiters. You think that, what do you think's going on there? They're just looking for known violent, no, they just went, it's a Mexican restaurant. They're Mexican. Bullshit, right? They ate at the restaurant, got food served by these people, and then decided to raid them because, hey, it's a Mexican restaurant. They're Mexican. I bet we could. They're not. No, like we're being told the ICE claim is, we have this list of criminals, people convicted of violent crimes, and we're tracking them. No, that's not what's going on. No, that's bullshit. That is not what's going on. And these ICE agents are not very well trained, and they're out there and they're being assholes, and they've been basically told to be assholes, right? They're basically being told, go and make life miserable in Minneapolis. They're not being told why, but it's most likely because Trump and his faction of the deep state are mad about this Minneapolis, this Minnesota, Somalia stuff. And that could be a pro-Israel thing. I don't know exactly what it's about, but we don't know exactly why all these people were here and $9 billion was funneled to them. And we also don't know exactly why Trump and his faction of the deep state is mad about it, but they are. And that's what's going on. And ICE has broken the law, folks. Okay, right? Let's just be real. They have at this point a smoking gun. They were told, go into people's houses without warrants. That's a violation of the U.S. Constitution. You can't go into a private home unless you have a warrant. You can't do that. But ICE was basically told, yeah, just go into people's houses. Just break into people's homes without warrants. You can do that. No, you can't. Right? ICE. And so you have a situation where ICE is basically just being given a license to terrorize this city and make everyone miserable there, especially the Somali community, but also everybody there. Everyone's living in fear, and and they're going around shoving people and kicking down doors and making everyone afraid and scared. And they just sent the biggest 3,000 agents to one city to bully people, right? To be assholes, basically, to punish this city for political reasons. Okay. And so then what? And now we get to the protesters. So the local Democratic Party machine has mobilized a bunch of woke people, white woke people mainly, to harass the crap out of ICE, right? And to harass them. And on the surface, you might think that sounds heroic, right? Oh, these people, they're no. Okay. I got to tell you, I have literally videotaped people of color getting beaten up by the police and gotten them acquitted in court. I have been doing anti-racism my whole life, anti-racist activism. I feared for my safety for 10 days. Every time I was around these protesters, immediately they would see me and my cameraman. Where are you from? Are you right wing? Are you news? How do we know you're not a conservative? Multiple times people said, I noticed you. I know you from somewhere. Thank God they didn't know who I was, right? I went out to Minneapolis a year ago and had a workshop. 15 of these assholes were outside with signs about sexual stuff and Putin and Russia. And out there, every time I'm there covering their rally, right? And I'm there with my camera guy. And who are you working for? Are you right wing? Are you conservative? We want to see your social media. We need to make sure. It was like, you're not allowed to be anyone who might potentially disagree with them, right? And, the camera guy, the local camera guy, not going to say his name, who was working with me, bless his heart, great guy. And I mean, bless his heart in a good way, not in the sarcastic way. And I'm not going to dox him or say, he has a car, a normal vehicle that he carries his camera equipment around. At least 5 times, people flagged our vehicle as an ICE vehicle. At least 5 fucking times. And I'm not ICE. I've never worn a uniform for the military or the police in my whole goddamn life. But I guess it was a nice car. Numerous times he had to stop the car and get out and show the protesters his press credential and show them his ID. I am not an ICE agent. This is not an ICE vehicle. This is just my car. I'm a cameraman who does fucking reporting. These people are complete assholes. And and first of all, if anyone's watching, right? These people, they're not communists, all right? That is like every Trumper thinks these people are communists. These people ain't communists. They don't know shit. Right? They don't know shit, okay? You think they're communists? No, they're not communists. Their politics, they're all white, mind you. All of them are white, right? The local black community actually kind of resents the Somali community. And there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment among African Americans, but it's more complicated than that. But the local black community is not fully with these people. Some are, right, because of the George Floyd thing and all that, but not all of them, right? But like these people, their politics consists of I want to murder all Trump supporters because all Trump supporters are racist and deserve to die. I love transgender. Everything's transgender. Look, I've got purple hair. Shut up, white man. They don't know shit. Not about economics, not about imperialism, about nothing. They're just purple-haired freaks, and their life's dream is to tattle on somebody. No, I'm not making this up. That's why it's not that they thought my camera guy's ICE vehicle was an ICE vehicle. They wanted it to be an ICE vehicle so they could tattle on somebody. I bet that's and they're so excited to blow their whistles at somebody, to take a picture of somebody. They just want to cancel somebody. It's over socialization, right? These are people that are insecure in themselves, have self-doubt, and the way they can find validation is punishing somebody for violating the kindergarten rules. Donald Trump says racist words and is a big racist, and so I'm going to be a hero by going around and harassing anybody who looks like they might possibly be for Trump, and that shows that I'm a good boy and I get a sticker. There is nothing remotely anti-establishment about these people. They all want World War III with Russia. They want to nuke Russia because Putin is like Trump and he's a big racist. You know, they just want to beat up Trump supporters. They just want to have war with Russia. They want to cancel you if you question COVID. They want to cancel you if you question anything, right? Anything that might possibly challenge the establishment as a conspiracy theory, right? There's a list of things you're allowed to believe brought to you by CNN, and anyone who looks like they might be questioning it, right? You need to make their lives miserable and cancel them and violently attack them and threaten them. Awful, awful, awful folks, okay? And they all, again, that is their life's goal. If I can just find someone to tattle on, if I can just tattle on somebody, then I'm a hero, right? That's what they're about. They're awful, awful people, okay? But they don't deserve to die. And 2 of them were murdered. And that's, and that's another thing. First of all, right? Alex Preddy, they got a video of him kicking out the taillight of an ICE vehicle. So what? Do we have the death penalty in America for kicking out, an ICE vehicle? No. Do we have the death penalty for spitting on ICE officers? No. Even if we did, you'd have to have a trial first. No, he didn't deserve to die. You look at that video, there's no way he deserved to die. And the same for Renee Good. I mean, they claim the vehicle was driving. No. Right. And again, they didn't just shoot Alex Preddy once, right? If they had feared for their safety, they could have shot him once. If that was the case, they didn't. They shot him 10 times. They shot him dead. It was murder because these ICE agents haven't been properly trained and they've been oriented to act like assholes. And the local Democratic Party has mobilized these woke, hipster, awful people to follow them around and taunt them and call them nasty names and make them angry. And so they've responded by being assholes because they haven't been given proper training. They don't know how to handle, people being mean to them. And so they're already told to go out and be assholes and make everyone miserable in Minneapolis. And it's a mess. Look, I am horrified by what ICE is doing. ICE is violating Americans' rights. I am not for it. But these protesters are assholes, and they are not. Look, if they were good people, they would not be, threatening violence against anyone who disagrees with them. I would be able to cover their protests and not fear for my safety. I would have been able a year ago, before any of this happened, to have a workshop in Minneapolis without 15 of them outside talking about crazy internet gossip and stuff. These are bad people. Right. And they're not communists. These people don't know anything about communism. They're not communists. They're not socialists. They're just assholes. Right. They just want to be good little kindergartners and get their sticker by tattling on the other kid. Right. And I honestly, I don't understand it. They're all in their early 20s and I don't get it. Right. Because I grew up in a very, very conservative area. Right. My school was a lot stricter than any of you can ever imagine. And yeah, that was a thing when I was in kindergarten and first grade. I remember when I was in first grade, kindergarten, especially kindergarten, when somebody did something bad, everyone would go, oh, we would like gasp and like, oh, and the teacher would actually remember just saying, you need to stop doing that. If someone's breaking the rules, you don't go, oh, right. And you know, and that was, you know, being a tattletale was a thing that kids would do, right? They'd see somebody doing something wrong. They'd run to the teacher. Oh, teacher, so-and-so said a bad word, right? You know, and, you know, it was like a stage kind of that you went through, is wanting to get other kids in trouble, you know, wanting to see other kids get in trouble. And it annoyed the teachers. They generally didn't like it, right? If it was something serious that threatened the safety, fine. But they don't really like all the kids running to them saying, teacher, so-and-so cussed, or so-and-so, you know, was drawing outside the lines. They don't like it, right? So, but there was a punitive response, right? They generally, if a kid did something bad when I was growing up, they got punished. They don't do that now in school. It's a very laid back kind of environment, which is probably much healthier. Okay. I'm not an advocate of kids being harshly punished, but I don't understand where the tattletale culture comes from, right? I mean, the thrill of being a tattletale when you're in elementary school is that you get to see the person you've tattled on get in trouble. But these kids haven't grown up in schools like that. Generally, if a kid is misbehaving, they go and talk to the principal, and the principal asks them about their feelings, and talks to them about, you know, and they don't have that kind of atmosphere in schools anymore. So I don't understand where this tattletale culture is coming from. But it's probably over socialization, is that these people are very insecure. Social media has really done a number on the self-esteem of young people, right? And, you know, you talk about cancel culture. These kids are always canceling each other, right? Kids get canceled by the other people at their school. Videos are put up making fun of their outfit. They get shared by everybody. And, you know, I'm really lucky. I'm 38 years old. I'm really lucky that I didn't grow up when, you know, I wasn't in high school and social media existed, right? The kids are really nasty to each other these days, and there's a lot less self-esteem. People are constantly comparing themselves to others, and you know, the next generation has got serious mental health issues. And look at the suicide rate, and look at the drug addiction rate, and all of that. You know, so I get it, but I get it, but I don't get it. I don't understand why there are so many people with pink hair and nose piercings whose goal in life is to tattle on somebody, right? And I also don't understand how that became synonymous with socialism and communism. Folks, I'll tell you something. I got interested in socialism and communism because I disagreed with my teacher, not because I wanted a sticker from my teacher. My teacher told me that communism killed a gajillion people and failed everywhere it's ever been tried. And I had the courage to do my own research and think outside the box. That's why I got into this kind of politics. These people, they don't give a shit about any of that. They just want to follow the rules. And their teacher told them Trump is a big, mean racist, and so they want their sticker. They are very weak people. They have absolutely no courage. They're not allowed to think anything unless CNN told it to them already, right? You know, these are the kind of people that you know, they think PSL is a woke, awful leftist group that panders endlessly, but they think PSL is fascist because it disagrees with U.S. foreign policy. Like, they're nuts. They're DSA scum. All right. And you know, I mean, they have made it their mission to go around and provoke ICE as much as they can. And ICE are going around acting like assholes and trying to provoke them. And now we have the situation in Minneapolis, right? And you know, that's what I was out there seeing. And I stand by what I said before I left. ICE is wrong. I am not going to defend ICE, right? I'm not going to defend ICE. They murdered somebody. They murdered Alex Preddy. They murdered Renee Good. 32 people died in the ICE detention facilities this year. Did you know that? 32 people died. And that's the highest ever. It was like 1 or 2 last year and 3 or 4 the year before that. And now it's 32. You think these people are just naturally dying? Something is very, very wrong. ICE is sinister, and Trump has escalated. There's a war on our freedom in this country. And after 9/11, Bush did his, you know, extraordinary rendition and holding people as enemy combatants, that awful thing. And then Obama continued with the drone strike program, killing American citizens. And then it continued under Trump again. And then Biden escalated it, going after people who disagree with American foreign policy and calling them foreign agents. And now it's continuing. There's a war on our freedom. And what it really is Bonapartism. This is the capitalist state breaking down. The ruling class are fighting with each other. So the rules of the game are changing because the ruling class are fighting with each other. And that's what's happening in the streets of Minneapolis, right? That ICE are the foot soldiers of Trump. That's why the Democrats want to abolish the ICE agency, right? They're the foot soldiers of Trump. And the woke people are the foot soldiers of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and, George Soros and the international, there's just a division within the ruling class. Okay. Now, there's a couple things that have come out of this that I think there's actually a couple minor positives from the ICE Minneapolis drama. A couple minor positives amid all the negativity about it. There are a couple minor positives. One is that amid the the obnoxiousness of the woke people that have been like stationed to like direct traffic and confront people for possibly being right-wing on the street, amid that and amid the fear in the community of ICE, amid all of that, there has been a revival of community values. And one of our members, an elderly man, a single elderly man, has said, my neighbors check on me in ways they never did before, right? That, he's an elderly man. He's got a nice dog, but he's not married. He lives by himself. He's 80 years old. He's an old guy who's a CPI member, a great man. Very friendly man. I'm not going to say his name. Don't want to dox him. Again, if I say his name on here, tomorrow there'll be two pink-hairs at his door blowing whistles. You're bad. You associate with Caleb. And he doesn't support ICE. And, he's probably more in line with the anti-ICE people than I am. But regardless, that point aside, and he shared with me, and one of our members out there shared with me that since this debacle began, his neighbors have been checking on him and knocking on his door saying, how are you doing? Are you doing all right? Do you need us to give you a ride someplace? Can we help you? They've been caring about him a lot more, and that there's more of a sense of community in his neighborhood. And that's a good thing, right? And I don't care where that comes from, woke, MAGA, or whatever. If people are caring about each other more, I'm for it. That I approve of. The other thing that has come out of this, and this is, it almost pains me to say this one, but it's true. And I don't know what this might lead to. And I almost don't want to say this. It like hurts me to say this because I can't stand these wokesters. But it pains me to admit this. Here I'm going to say it. Protesting works. They proved it. Protesting works. Trump is pulling the agents out of the city. Right? If Alex Preddy was still alive, if Renee Good was still alive, if they hadn't done everything they could to just swarm these guys, ICE would still be there doing their thing. But ICE was confronted, and these people made ICE miserable and blew their whistles and all of that, and they created enough of a scandal for Trump, and two of their people were shot, and now Trump is pulling out of the city. They're de-escalating the operation. Thousands of officers have already left. They're de-escalating the whole thing. Furthermore, the next place that ICE was headed was Portland, Maine, right? Portland, Maine was the next target. Now Trump has said, no. He said he's only going to send ICE to cities where the mayor asks for help, right? He's framing it, Trump's argument, I don't know if you saw the video. Trump is framing it as, well, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to help people who don't want my help, right? And so if a mayor asks for my help, asks him to send ICE, he'll send ICE. But he's not doing this, sending ICE to Democrat cities anymore. Why? Protesting works. It's true, right? As much as these people are obnoxious, as much as they're not friendly to me and not politically where I'm at, they made Trump back down, right? ICE was in Minneapolis, making people's lives miserable, kicking down the doors, going into homes without warrants, terrorizing people, and now they're pulling out. And that's because protesting works. So that's my take on Minneapolis, right? It's nuanced. There are different sides to all these things. The truth is much more complicated than fiction. Anyone who tries to give you a black and white scenario right now in America is being dishonest with you. And Oh, I do want to say this, right? One of the most dangerous aspects of American politics right now is the use of trauma, right? Plenty of people on the right are just as frustrated as I am with the woke people. And so they're celebrating the murder of Alex Preddy. And they're celebrating the murder of Renee Good and making memes about their deaths. You know, oh, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Ha ha ha. That's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Right? Absolutely disgusting. Look, this guy, maybe you disagree with him. He vandalized a car. He spit on somebody. He doesn't deserve to die. And if you make those memes mocking and celebrating their death, it's not just your buddies who are going to see that. Other people are going to see it, and they're going to think, wow, these people want to murder me. And they're going to look at the dead body of Alex Preddy, and they're going to think that could be me or my neighbor or my kid, and they're going to be horrendously traumatized by it. And same thing after the death of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was murdered, shot in the neck, and all the woke people on the internet, woo, yeah, you know, same thing, right? Stop celebrating people's deaths. Stop celebrating people getting killed just because they're on the other team. Right? Marjorie Taylor Greene had an amazing tweet where she said, look, this is just like Ashley Babbitt. This is somebody who maybe they were confronting law enforcement. They were someplace they didn't have to be. They didn't have to die. Right? There was no reason for the Capitol Police to put a bullet through Ashley Babbitt. There was absolutely no reason for ICE to put a bullet through Alex Preddy. Right? If somebody has a gun out and is pointing it at you, yes, you have the right to shoot back. But if someone just has a gun on them, right? Alex Preddy was a licensed gun owner, right? You know, that doesn't mean he deserved to die. He at no point did he pull his gun out. He had his gun in his holster, and you know, there was no reason to kill him. He did not need to die. And this toxic, I talk about the years of lead. I've been talking about how the years of lead, the intelligence apparatus in America is trying to stage a years of lead, right? And part of getting that going is creating a culture of celebrating political violence, creating a culture where you're fine with the police killing somebody, you're fine with somebody being murdered in front of their children and in front of their wife and kids, as long as they're on the other team. I'm not. A life is a life. Murder is wrong. Even if somebody's on the other team, they're still a person. Okay? And that this is how the CIA subdued Italy. And this is a big point of CPI. I said it on Kim Iverson's show. I wrote a whole book about it. Italy was going to leave NATO in the 1970s. The Christian Democrat Party and the Communist Party were even going to create a coalition government. And the way that NATO and the CIA prevented that is they funneled money to the Red Brigades, and they funneled money to the Italian Social Movement and other far-right groups. And with the CIA giving weapons and guns and money to both sides, communists and fascists and communists and communists and fascists started killing each other. And there was an extended period of shootings, bombings, and assassinations called the Years of Lead. And the population became weary. They just couldn't deal with it, right? People were afraid to get involved politically. They didn't want to get shot. People couldn't tell who was on what side. And I mean, at least 400 people were murdered. But in addition to that, hundreds, thousands of people were shot in their legs and crippled for life, right? And as a result, Italy's population that wanted to leave NATO, the left and the right, they wanted a more independent Italy. They just kind of got weary, and NATO won by default. And that is what I believe the American apparatus is trying to do. Americans are pissed right now. They're pissed that they don't have jobs that pay decent wages. They're pissed that the roads are falling apart. They're pissed that every president promises, I'm going to end the wars, and doesn't do it. They're pissed that our rights are being taken away. They're pissed that under every administration, there's more kicking down people's doors and violating their rights, whether it's what Biden did to the Uhuru movement and to the January 6thers, whether it's what Trump is doing now with ICE, whether it's what Bush did to the Muslim community. Our rights are being taken away, okay? Our rights are being taken away Our economic situation is getting shittier, and our government is just committed to these endless wars around the world while life gets worse here and we collapse into a low-wage police state. Americans are pissed. Americans are pissed about this. They don't like it. And the way that Satan is going to win by default, the way they're going to get away with this is they're going to create so much political violence and so much crazy woke on MAGA shooting, killing, people celebrating, shooting and killing and fear that they'll just win by default, because we all will just become so afraid of getting shot. We'll all just get so tired of the shrill tone and the killing, and we'll all hate our neighbors and be afraid of our neighbors, and NATO and imperialism will win by default. And that's what we need to oppose. And while I was out there, I couldn't stream because I didn't want to give away my location. I was getting threats while I was out. Folks, my safety was in danger while I was out there, right? I deserve credit for going out there and being in risky situations. And shout out to the people, not going to name names, who accompanied me, who were there to support me. You know who you are. And shout out to my comrades out there in CPI, Minneapolis, and all that. Thank you. I was in danger. They don't like me in Minneapolis. Whoever's running that Somali, Minneapolis deep state, they know who I am and they don't like me. They probably hate Russia, I would assume. But anyway, while I was out there, I couldn't stream. And I thank you all for being loyal and being here, even though I couldn't stream. But while I was out there, I wrote a book. And that book is finished. I put the finishing touches on it earlier this evening. That's why I started a little bit late. I was coming back from, I like to sit in a cafe when I write. I don't like to write in my house. I want to get someplace where I can just focus on the writing, where I don't have all this stuff in my house. And I finished the final section of this book. I've wrote and gone over the other sections, but I needed to just put the finishing touches on it. I'm going to be publishing that book very shortly. And this book is very exciting. It's got a lot of themes in it that I have written about before, but it takes them in a new direction. And I don't want to reveal too much about it. It's kind of similar to some of the streams I did before I left town. It's kind of similar to a lot of the things that have been themes in my lectures and all of that. But I did it, and I was able to make sure I did much more meticulous research for this book than I normally do, right? A lot of my books, you'll notice I use the same quotations and all that. This time I found new material, new quotes, new data, new sources, new angles. And I went over some history and I wrote a book. And the title of this book is going to take people by surprise. I'm not going to say it. But I think this book is going to surprise you all. I really do. This book is very spiritual. It's very anti-imperialist, lots of historical information, but coming at that historical information from a new angle. And this book is about the Soviet Union, and this book is about America. It's mainly about America, but it's also a lot about the Soviet Union. It's about Europe. It's about God. It's about Jesus. It's about the communist movement and how it has gone wrong, and it is about Stalin. I'll just tell you that much. This book is about Stalin. And this book is not like anything I've written before. You could say this is like the follow-up edition, right? I wrote Khrushchevism, right, about Khrushchev's secret speech and how it destroyed the global communist movement. Well, this book that I'm about to publish, which I'm not going to give away too much information about it, is about what Khrushchev destroyed in detail. It's about what Khrushchev destroyed and understanding it beyond communism. Understanding that communism had different expressions and that different forces expressed themselves through communism. That's what the book is about. And I will do what I did with my previous books. I will read it all on this stream. I don't think I'm going to make a huge amount of money off this book. It'd be nice if I did. That's not why I wrote it. I wrote this book because it's about innovationism and the way our movement is going and the future of our movement. And I am very excited. I am glad. In a way, I feel like going out there and chilling in Minneapolis I kept thinking I was coming home and my trip kept getting extended. I needed to do that. I needed to do that because I needed to write this book. This book needed to be written. And so I wrote it. And it's about overcoming trauma. It's about the dangers of the years of lead. It's about the kind of optimistic politics that we need in our time and examples of it throughout history. I drew from so much source material. And this is not like anything I've ever written before. I will say that. It's got a lot of themes that I've written about, but it takes it to another level. And maybe it'll make a splash. I don't know. I don't know if it'll make a splash or not, but I don't care. Because I didn't write it to get rich. I didn't write it to get famous. I wrote it because it's what you all need to hear. And it's orientation for the innovationist movement, just like this book is, right? This book was about, the psychological operations they use to dismantle anti-imperialist groups and all of that. Well, this book is about the positive, the what has been built and what it really is and what it represents and what different forces were represented in communism in the 20th century and what's going on now and why the woke left is not anything like what we need and what it is that we need and what are the themes that we need. You're going to like it. You will like it. If you like what I do on this channel, you're going to love this new book. You are going to learn some stories that will deeply move you. You are going to learn some information about the history of communism in America and Russia that will change your perspective on everything. You are going to learn religious concepts that you've not heard before. This new book is something special. And I guess I'll stop rambling about it. I wrote it. Of course, I like it, right? I've never understood. I'll just say this. As a writer, right? Why do people write books they don't like? Right? I mean, maybe if it's your job, if you're like commissioned to write a book you don't like, okay. But for the most part, right? When I write a book, I write it for me. Right? I write it because I want people to read it because I feel good about it. Right? I used to know somebody who studied composition. Right? And he was learning to be a composer. And he told me, I hate the music I compose. I said, well, then why compose it? Right? Creativity is about loving what you're creating. Right? And that being creative is about being driven to express something within your soul through your art form. And for me, my art form tends to be my writing or my speaking or whatever. And, that's that. Couple other things I wanted to talk about before we start answering questions. As always, just a quick reminder, buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions. Please buy me a coffee. That's send your questions via buy me a coffee. That's the way I like to get questions. You can also do Rumble Rants. They are appreciated. You can also do Cash App, Caleb Moffin 22, but the best way to send your questions is via buy me a coffee. A couple other things. I did record 3 episodes this morning with Academic Agent, right? I went on his channel once before and, it was fun. And he had me on and we recorded 3 separate episodes this morning. And it was supposed to be a half hour. It ended up being almost an hour for every episode. So keep an eye out for that. I'll tell you, though, these were hard-hitting interviews. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. I don't want to ruin it. But we did 3 episodes, each with a different theme. Whew! I mean, it was awesome. And I'm really excited about that. So keep your eye out for that. So I got 2 more things I want to talk about, and they're actually kind of related. The first thing I wanted to talk about, the remaining thing, Noam Chomsky. So in case you haven't heard, Noam Chomsky and Jeffrey Epstein are good buddies. Were good buddies before Jeffrey bit the dust. And emails have surfaced of Noam Chomsky. They didn't just know each other. Noam Chomsky said he fantasized about Jeffrey Epstein's island. On top of that, Noam Chomsky advised Jeffrey Epstein about how to avoid scandal and how to downplay the allegations about his sex trafficking ring in the media. Is pretty bad. I just want to talk about Noam Chomsky a little bit because Noam Chomsky is a very, very good lesson for all of us. We need to just talk about who Noam Chomsky is. So Noam Chomsky is an American of Jewish descent. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He went to a socialist Hebrew school that was aligned with the Communist Party. As a teenager, he was a very high-achieving student. His mother was a member of the Communist Party. And when asked about that, he always says that's because she wanted to play baseball. Because it's true. Back in the day, the Communist Party, people joined it because it had a baseball league, right? The Communist Party was a real party. And people joined it not because they read about its political line on the internet, but because it was in the neighborhood. And if you lived in Brighton Beach, New York in particular, or other parts of Brooklyn, you know, just like you might join a church in your neighborhood because your kid wants to sing in the choir, or you want a Sunday school or a daycare to take your kid to, Noam's mother joined the Communist Party, and she said because she wanted to play baseball. And it's true that if you were a woman, the only people running a high school girls baseball league in the neighborhood, in this poor neighborhood full of Jewish immigrants from different parts of Eastern Europe, was the Communist Party. Think about that. So Noam's mom joined the Communist Party because she wanted to play baseball. Noam grew up and went to a Communist Party Hebrew school. Like it was like a Jewish Hebrew school that was run by the Communist Party. Noam, after World War II, Noam went into academia. He was an award-winning linguist. He was just a good linguist. And just like a lot of leftists, he opposed the Vietnam War. He denounced communism and became an anarchist, right? And in the 70s and 80s, suddenly Noam Chomsky became the face of anti-imperialism. And he was the critic of U.S. foreign policy, and he went on PBS very regularly. They would have him on PBS. They would have him on NPR. But mainly, he wasn't in American media, right? Noam Chomsky, many of his bios list Noam Chomsky as being the most quoted source in the English language after the Bible. Now, that's not true anymore, but that was true in the 70s, 80s, even in the 90s. Why? Because Noam Chomsky was quoted in Soviet media. He was the famous American intellectual, the MIT Harvard professor, who would come out and give a very modest critique of U.S. foreign policy that got into mainstream media and then got picked up by Soviet media and communist and Soviet-aligned media and disseminated all over the world. And he got that gig. And that I've heard from people who lived in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. People in the Soviet Union thought everyone in America listened to Noam Chomsky. And really, the only people in America that had ever heard of Noam Chomsky were leftists, socialists, communists, peace activist kind of people. They knew who Noam Chomsky was. But Noam Chomsky was on Soviet television almost every day. And that was arranged. And Noam Chomsky would always denounce the Soviet Union as a brutal dictatorship. But whatever the Soviet Union was saying about Nicaragua, or about Colombia, or about the Middle East, about Lebanon, about Palestine, Noam would echo it, right? And he would be an American voice that would echo Soviet criticisms of American foreign policy while denouncing the Soviet Union. And that's the role that he played. And what was weird about Noam Chomsky is how did he get this gig, right? Right? You'd think, okay, well, maybe he's a famous professor of political science. Nope. Maybe he's a professor of world history. Nope. Maybe he's a professor of sociology. Nope. Maybe he's a professor of economics. No. Maybe Noam Chomsky teaches linguistics. So why in the hell? And here's the other thing. Okay, well, maybe Caleb, maybe Noam Chomsky, maybe that's not his field academically, but he was such an important activist, right? He was the leader of peace marches. Nope. He was the leader of a socialist group. Nope. Noam was just a Harvard guy who grew up in communism, denounced communism, and became a weird anarcho-intellectual, taught linguistics at MIT, and got the gig to be Mr. Smart Guy on American TV. I first encountered Noam Chomsky after 9/11, right? When I was first getting into leftist politics, I encountered Noam Chomsky. And there were two books by Noam Chomsky that came out right after 9/11. right after 9/11, the whole country was in a super patriotic overdrive. We're going to go, I remember people had signs, nuke 'em, George, nuke 'em, and everyone wanted to bomb the whole Middle East and kill all the Muslims for 9/11, right? It was very right wing. It was a really scary, even in places like New York City, even in places that are very, very liberal, there was this kind of pro-war bloodlust, revenge, kill all the Muslims. It was frightening, right? You're lucky if you didn't experience that like I did. And I was in a little town. My little town practically turned into a military rally, for a couple years, right? I mean, so many assemblies I had to sit through about we got to support the troops, and we had to make candy packets to give to the soldiers, every morning. And we had assemblies where they were denouncing the protesters, these un-American people who protest the war, and it was something. So in that atmosphere, as an 8th and 9th grader, I started reading Noam Chomsky. And at the time, and this is a lot of people's experience, and there are people defending Noam Chomsky now, and I mean, I can kind of, as much as I don't agree with them, I can understand why they might do that. For a lot of people, that was the only place, the only criticism of American foreign policy that you could ever hear. Right? And I remember after 9/11 at Barnes and Noble, there were 2 books by Noam Chomsky. One was just called 9/11, and the other was called Power and Terror. It was called Power and Terror. And it made very, very basic criticism of U.S. foreign policy, basically saying 9/11 was very, very horrible, but America's done a lot of awful things. I remember one of the big lines in the 9/11 book, or it was one of them, Power and Terror or the 9/11 book. One of the big lines is Noam Chomsky, and of course he has the most boring voice ever. He says, after 9/11, people said that New York City looked like Beirut, but we also must point out Beirut looks like Beirut. And part of the reason that Beirut looks like Beirut is because of American policy. Wow. Mind blown. Utterly profound. But actually, when I was in 9th grade, I couldn't find anyone else saying that. And from there, he lists various covert operations the CIA has carried out in Beirut, blowing up mosques and and arming terrorist groups. And Beirut looks like Beirut because of America. Okay, that's the point of the book. That's like the only point of the book that I remember. But he basically just says 9/11 was awful. I really feel bad about it. But America's also done some bad things around the world. That's the point of the book. Right? That's really it. I also remember, I think it was in Power and Terror, that he talked about how Japanese people are offended that Americans called the site of the Twin Towers Ground Zero, because Ground Zero was the term invented for the places you couldn't go after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I didn't know that, right? But Ground Zero, after they nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were certain areas you couldn't go to because they were covered in nuclear dust, and they were called Ground Zero. You weren't supposed to go there. And after 9/11, for some reason, we just started calling the site of the Twin Towers Ground Zero. And that a lot of Japanese people took great offense at that. I didn't know that. Okay, fine. That's all I learned from the book. All I learned from the book. And it's said in the most dull, kind of boring way. But that was Noam's gig. And that was Noam's gig. So Noam Chomsky. So then the other thing is Noam Chomsky was very opposed to the war in Iraq, right? Said that even if Iraq does have weapons of mass destruction, America has such weapons too. And I mean, it was like he was opposed to the war in Iraq. And after 9/11, there was kind of like he was the one opposition. He was like the controlled opposition. He was like the made for TV opposition, the voice of criticism of U.S. foreign policy. And I look back on those years now, and I've said this many times on these streams. In some way, that's a whole nother rant I can talk about another time. But the messaging wasn't very helpful after 9/11. The American public was traumatized by a horrendous act of terrorism. And Noam said, yeah, but we've done bad stuff too. And to most people, that sounded like, oh, you're saying we deserved it, which is not what he was saying, but that's kind of how it came across. And it was just like the narrative was kind of like America has gone around the world and done lots of bad things. True. Now someone did something bad to us. True. And so let's just kind of sing kumbaya. And I don't know. It was not the most coherent anti-imperialism. I'll just put it that way. And Howard Zinn said similar things and all of that. But after Obama got elected, Noam Chomsky suddenly changed his tune. He didn't oppose U.S. foreign policy. During the Arab Spring, he supported the overthrow of Gaddafi. He cheered for the overthrow of Gaddafi. And he cheered for Libya, for the overthrow of Libya, or over the overthrow of Libya, for Syria, for the Syrian conflict. So much so, he even wrote an article that was in the New York Times saying that America was more afraid of the revolution against Assad than they were of Assad, and that America didn't really want Assad to fall because the revolution from below was just so glorious and had so much hope. It was utterly despicable. And I have had one encounter with Noam Chomsky. You can cancel me now. I have talked to somebody who talked to Jeffrey Epstein. I did have my encounter with Noam Chomsky, and I will show you that video. This is Caleb Maupin meets Noam Chomsky. It's funny. It was after Occupy Wall Street. It was in like 2012, I think, or 2013. All right. I was a reporter for Press TV stationed at the UN, and there were two events I could cover that day. Two. And one of the events was Russell Brand. I was invited to a reception with Russell Brand, the actor, and the other was to go to this event where I could ask Noam Chomsky a question as a reporter from Press TV. So I had to pick Russell Brand, Noam Chomsky. Russell Brand, Noam Chomsky. I picked Noam Chomsky. Looking back, I probably should have picked Russell Brand. You know, I probably should have picked Russell Brand, but what the hell? I mean, it's kind of funny. That was my pick. You know, are you going to go to the Occupy Wall Street? I got an invitation from people I know. He was having a special reception for Occupy people. I was invited. I got a ticket to go meet Russell Brand and hang out with Russell Brand to talk about Occupy Wall Street. I had one ticket, and Noam Chomsky was coming to the UN that day. And I figured, well, you know, I was getting paid by the story. I was a freelancer. And so I said, I better go talk to Noam. So Noam Chomsky came to the United Nations to speak, and he was invited by the Arab League. The Arab League, right? That's you know, that's Saudi Arabia and, you know, Qatar and Oman and Yemen and Kuwait, and the Arab League had just expelled the Syrian government, right? Syria was expelled from the Arab League, right? And the Arab League paid Noam Chomsky, I'm sure, millions of dollars with their oil money to come and give a speech condemning Israel at the United Nations. So Noam showed up, and I'm there as the Press TV reporter, TV network from Iran, and it had just been revealed that Iran had Israel had assassinated 4 nuclear energy scientists who were running Iranian nuclear power plants. And so I went to this event and I asked Noam Chomsky about the Iranian nuclear scientists who were killed. And this is my one interaction with Noam. This is Caleb talking to Noam Chomsky, right? So you can cancel me. I talked to a guy who is an Epstein collaborator. I didn't know that at the time, obviously. This is Caleb with Noam Chomsky.
Press TV News. And in the last couple days, there have been reports in the U.S. media quoting figures from the Mujahideen Khalq, which is a terrorist organization, alleging that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. And it has been leaked that the Israeli government has cooperated with Mujahideen Khalq to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists. And my question is that a violation of international law? And why is it that Israel is cooperating with what was at one point universally recognized as a violent terrorist organization?
Violation of international, we can debate this or that fact that's not yet accepted and agreed, but there are gross violations of international law which are proclaimed openly and publicly and presented with self-praise. So, for example, suppose that when President Obama, or any Western, any American diplomat or journalist, says that with regard to Iran, all options are open, as is said constantly. What does that mean? All options are open means force is open, means nuclear attack is open. Those of you who may recall an obscure document called the UN Charter might remember Article 2, which bans the threat or use of force in international affairs. The threat or use of force.
Now, he didn't answer my fucking question, right? Or he did answer it. He answered it with the 4 Ds of dodgeball: dodge, dip, duck, and dodge. I asked him about the Mujahideen cult terrorists murdering Iranian nuclear scientists. And he said, why focus on one crime? Every time Obama says all options are on the table, that's use of force. That violates the UN Charter. Like, it's universally accepted that Israel and MEK teamed up to kill these nuclear scientists. I asked him to condemn it, and he made a point of not giving me the soundbite I needed. Why? Well, at that point, the Arab League that had paid for him to be there, he was paid. I mean, you can bet he was paid, and it was not a secret that he was paid, right? I mean, it was the Arab League hosted this whole event for Noam, and they were anti-Iran, right? Iran and the Arab League were not getting along. It was that Sunni Shia thing, and he was there, and that would have offended his hosts if he had said something to the benefit of Iran, like Israel murdered one of their nuclear scientists. That wouldn't be helpful, now would it? So instead, he dodged my question. Yes, and Amy Goodman is sitting next to him, and there were a whole layer of people that were generally critics of U.S. foreign policy, that as soon as Obama took office, they were on board with U.S. foreign policy in Syria, in Libya, especially on Russia, hating Russia, Ukraine, all that stuff. And that's very, very suspicious to me. Now we find out about Noam and Epstein. And, I have maintained for a long time that, look, part of the way the Soviet Union was brought down is that in the 70s and 80s, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, officially as a democratic centralist party, they all said the same thing. The official government line was put forward in a very dull way. But beneath the surface, there were 2 factions, the hardliners and the reformists or the moderates. And the U.S. government courted the moderates. And the moderates were people like Gorbachev and Yeltsin, who were convinced that the USA would let them transition to becoming a social democratic welfare state. And that's what they believed. That's what Gorbachev believed. That's what Yeltsin believed, is that communism, Marxism, Leninism was outdated, and that the West wasn't so bad, right? Imperialism wasn't so bad. It was just Reagan. It was just those Republicans, the bad ones. But Bill Clinton and Bernie Sanders and the liberals are not so bad, and they'll help the Soviet Union adopt more human rights and transition to becoming not a communist government, not a planned economy, but a welfare state that gives people free health care and takes care of them. And that's what socialism really means. And if you read Gorbachev's speech, where he talks about universal human values, replacing Marxism, Leninism, and class struggle with universal human values, that's what was going on. Noam Chomsky was part of that operation. And that's what was going on. Is Noam was the most famous academic, the top linguist in America, and he didn't agree with those hardline communist policies, but he shared their criticism of U.S. foreign policy. And, he agreed that what the USA is doing in Nicaragua and what the USA is doing in Lebanon, and it's wrong. And he was there to court the reformist wing of the Soviet bureaucracy, to boost the Yeltsins and the Gorbachevs, and isolate the hardliners, right? And it was soft power manipulation. Look, folks, the Soviet Union was not brought down by Ronald Reagan. Fox News repeats that over and over. It was Ronald Reagan who escalated the arms race. That's what brought down the Soviet Union. No, that's what caused the Soviet Union lots of economic problems because they had to spend money they should have spent building up their economy on building more nukes. It wasn't really an arms race. It was an arms catch-up, as Michael Parenti talks about. That's not what brought down the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was brought down by ideological subversion. Western leftism, the Frankfurt School, the hippie counterculture, pessimism, Malthusian environmentalism, the Western left inserted itself into the Soviet Union, and a big section of the Soviet Communist Party was recruited to be like the people that were harassing me in Minneapolis, to be woke, blue-haired environmental liberals. And those people were deceived by America to believe that if they got rid of the Soviet Union, America would say, good job, and they would become the next Norway or Sweden. That's not what happened. What happened is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, George Soros and Jeffrey Sachs, who now says a lot of good things, but back then was an advocate of neoliberal economics, and the International Monetary Fund, they went in there to Russia and they looted the place. 30% unemployment, 80,000 factories closed their doors, extreme poverty at like 30-40%. The fall of the Soviet Union was an economic catastrophe. And the country was sold off to the highest bidder and looted. And Noam was part of softening them up to let it happen, right? They needed people like Noam Chomsky to court the Soviet bureaucracy and to function as it's like a good cop, bad cop routine, right? We have American media to justify all the stuff America's doing, but we also need to show that there's criticism. But they didn't put some activist who'd organized a mass movement on there. They didn't put someone like Michael Parenti, who was pro-Soviet. They put Noam there to say, yeah, the Soviet Union's bad. It violates human rights. But also, America is bad. And Beirut looks like Beirut. And, it's just, that's Noam Chomsky. All right? That's Noam Chomsky. And the fact that he's involved with Jeffrey Epstein, the big thing that everyone talks about with that is that Noam Chomsky is notoriously anti-Israel. But yet, he told everyone not to boycott Israeli products. You remember that? That was a big thing. The Palestinians, Hamas and the West Bank leadership. Hamas runs Gaza, right? And Fatah runs the West Bank. One thing they agreed on is they called on all their allies, everyone who supports the Palestinians, boycott Israeli businesses. And they actually had a list of like 12 businesses based in Israel to boycott. And Noam came out, no, don't boycott Israel. That's not gonna work. Not gonna work. Don't do that. It's not a good thing to do. Look, we need to talk to the Israelis and we need Israel to stop violating. But if you boycott them, look, I understand most boycotts are stupid. All right. And I'll be honest with you. Boycotts, like 90% of the boycotts that leftists do, serve no purpose other than making the boycotter feel good about themselves. I don't shop at Walmart. I buy organic. I don't like that bullshit either. But the Montgomery bus boycott of Dr. Martin Luther King, that was a real boycott. They did not get on that bus, and they forced, civil rights legislation in a Supreme Court ruling, right? And union boycotts where they have pickets out in front. Don't shop here, right? That's a real thing, right? BDS is a real thing. First of all, if the Palestinians had the entire Muslim world aligned with them, governments that have lots and lots of money are choosing not to purchase from these companies. And BDS was actually so much of a threat to Israel that it's illegal. Did you know this? It is illegal in multiple U.S. states to boycott Israel, right? In Alabama, if you're going to work for the state of Alabama as a teacher, as a sanitation worker, at like down to local dog catcher, anyone who's employed by the state of Alabama must sign, I pledge I will not boycott Israel. Can you believe this, right? North Carolina, if you're going to work for the state of America, you have to sign a document, I will boycott Israel. Now, in New York, it's a little bit different. In New York, public employees don't have to sign that they will boycott Israel. But if you are a company that gets a contract with the state of New York, and you are openly calling for a boycott of Israel, the state of New York must terminate all its contracts with you. It doesn't apply to individuals in the state of New York, thank God, but it applies to companies, right? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous, right? And that tells me the fact that they've put those laws on the books here in New York for companies, in Alabama and North Carolina and all these states, the fact that they put those laws on the books tells me that boycott, divestment, and sanctions was a pretty big threat to Israel. And do you think the pro-Palestine movement is going to listen to, Netanyahu when he gets up and says, don't boycott Israel. We think you shouldn't boycott Israel. It's not the right thing to do. Gays for Palestine, barbecue them. No, you think no one's going to listen to him. Who can tell pro-Palestine people not to boycott Israel? If you want to make sure that people that are pro-Palestine keep buying Israeli products, who's one guy who can make it happen? I'm Noam Chomsky, and the Palestinians are violating human rights. I denounce them, but Israel, Beirut looks like Beirut too. Noam Chomsky. This is what I'm telling you. Noam telling people not to boycott Israel is far more valuable, right? Netanyahu, Alan Dershowitz, if they get up there and say, don't boycott Israel, no pro-Palestine person's going to listen to them. No Muslim's going to listen to them. But if Noam gets up there and says it, it's very helpful. Well, now we find out that Noam, was a good friend with somebody that the Epstein files confirms was an Israeli spy, and trained as an Israeli spy who had a sex harem and a sex island that Noam fantasized about. I mean, look at the emails for themselves. I mean, Noam Chomsky, look, if he was your gateway drug, if he was the first person you ever heard, if you watched Manufacturing Consent, this sucks. And I look, and sometimes you have to just go with what's there. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean your whole life has been a lie. It means that the only person you had access to say these things was him. After 9/11, the only person I could find who was not, repeating the war on terror talking points, who was it? Noam Chomsky. I read his books too. But then I moved on to, actual Marxists and anti-imperialists. I read William Z. Foster. I read, media from other countries, and I moved on from that. And Noam is there to make sure you don't, right? Noam is a gatekeeper. That's really what Noam Chomsky has always been. Noam Chomsky came out and said, after Oliver Stone made his film, JFK, Noam Chomsky put on press conferences all about, don't investigate the killing of JFK. It doesn't matter who killed JFK because, JFK did the Bay of Pigs invasion. JFK sent advisors to Vietnam. He was just another warmonger. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. I mean, what's that about, right? A major Hollywood movie about a conspiracy to kill Kennedy comes out, made by a brilliant director, Oliver Stone. I've worked with his son before. And I mean, Oliver Stone's amazing, really anti-imperialist, a friend of Russia, made a great Ukraine on Fire is an excellent film. And, Oliver Stone makes this great movie about, the holes in the story of the Kennedy assassination. So out of the blue, they roll out, Noam Chomsky comes out. It doesn't matter if they killed Kennedy. Kennedy did bad things too. And there are human rights violations from the Kennedy administration. So just don't worry about it. I'm the smart. They rolled him out. And after 9/11, one thing that Noam Chomsky did almost immediately after 9/11 They rolled out Noam. 9/11 conspiracies are racist. They're racist. Arab people can do bad things too. If you say that 9/11 was an inside job, you're saying that only white people can do acts of terrorism. That's racist. That's racist. You don't need a smart white guy to do an act of terror. And they rolled him out to say no to 9/11 truth. And it was like it was like, Noam's wheelchair. He was always there, to roll him out of his office, and they would get all the media in front of him. And when they needed someone to tell anti-war people and leftists what to do, to tell us not to boycott Israel, to tell us not to think about 9/11 truth, to tell us not to think about who killed Kennedy, to tell us to support overthrowing Assad in Syria, to tell us to support overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya, whenever they needed somebody to tell us what to do and make us ineffective and tell us to not really be anti-imperialists, they rolled Noam out in his wheelchair and they pointed the CNN cameras at him and told us what to do. That's what Noam Chomsky is, and that's what he's always been. He is there to control us. He is like the corrupt union bosses, right? That's what the corrupt union bosses, the labor lieutenants of capital. For what labor union bosses, what Jimmy Hoffa and Richard Trumka and the AFL-CIO are for the labor movement, that's what Noam Chomsky has always been for the anti-war movement. He has never organized a protest. He has never built a mass anti-war movement. He's a Harvard, MIT guy that they found and picked to be our boss. And I am so fucking tired of this, right? And it frustrates me. We've got to stop letting our enemies pick our leaders for us, right? Right? And it continues to happen, right? There are names I could name on here, and it's the same shit, right? It's the same shit, right? There's an organic movement of people really saying things, and so then they pick one of their people and make them say it. Stop letting our enemies pick our leaders for us, right? We didn't pick Noam Chomsky to lead anti-imperialism. They picked Noam Chomsky for us. They picked Mr. Boring Linguist Professor to tell us how to run our movement. And they put him on PBS and they put him on CNN. So he must be right, right? And even now that we find out he was going to Epstein's Island and all of that, even now that we find out what he was doing, there's still people that are just, but I read his books. He's the one who got me thinking this way. Yeah, that's because he's the only one they would let you have. That's because you didn't do your own research. That's because you didn't investigate enough to find this YouTube channel. That's because you didn't investigate enough to know who Michael Parenti was. That's because you didn't investigate enough to watch RT. You didn't investigate enough to watch Press TV. That's why. Okay? Yeah, I get it. He was the only one who was there when I was a kid, but I dug deeper, okay? It's not your fault. It's not an attack on you. If Noam was your gateway drug, that's not your fault. That's their fault. That's what they picked him to be. He's there to contain and control our anti-imperialist thought, and that's what he's always been, okay? That's what he's always been. And so, we just need to understand that. And the fact that he is tied up with the Mossad, not a shocker. He's been tied up with the American CIA for a long time. Not a shocker. I told you when he was speaking at the UN, he was being paid by the Arab League and the vassal states of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East, the Saudi head choppers, the Qatari monarchy that runs Al Jazeera. Again, are you shocked? No, I'm not shocked by any of this. I'm not shocked about any of this, right? Not shocked about any of this. And I really want to urge people to not get into fandom mode, right? Look, I hate to break it to you. Bad people can do good things. Right? Noam did a lot of good things. I mean, he said a lot of true things about U.S. imperialism. Right? That doesn't mean he was good. Right? Hitler was an awful mass murdering dictator, but I can guarantee you that at least a few times in his life, he probably said something true. There were probably times where Hitler said, the sky is blue, and it was actually blue. And that doesn't mean the sky wasn't blue just because Hitler said it wasn't true. Right? bad people can do good things, good people can do bad things and make mistakes, right? And that there's way too much of this in our circles in general of, I like this guy so he can do no wrong, or this guy I generally agree with on 90% of issues, let me down in his personal life, let me down by taking a position I don't agree with on this or that, so fuck him. Okay, we need to get over this, right? Take everything with a grain of salt. Noam Chomsky, his works are probably still worth reading. I probably have a couple of them on the shelf here still. I'm not throwing those books away, right? I think somewhere on this shelf. Yeah, I actually have a packet of Noam Chomsky books, right? I do. And you know what? I'm not throwing them away because there's true things in them. And I might quote them, right? I have this packet of the Noam Chomsky trilogy, right? The Prosperous Few and the Restless Many, What Uncle Sam Really Wants, Chomsky, Secret Lies and Democracy. I'm not throwing this away. I'm keeping this, right? I've got books by U.S. presidents here. I've got books by Muslim scholars. I've got books by evangelical Christians. Look, this is useful stuff. You could probably find Noam useful. Was Noam a good dude? No, he was a gatekeeper of anti-imperialism. He's an Israeli agent, and he's collaborating with a sex trafficker. Not a good dude, but did he say true things in his life? Absolutely, and that was kind of his job, right? So we need to be more mature and nuanced in how we understand things, right? Meanwhile, there are good people who've let me down in various ways. Look, for example, Michael Parenti just died. I love Michael Parenti. I love his stuff, but he didn't get the growth degrowth question, right? And you watch him. He didn't have the innovationist understanding. He didn't have the understanding of capitalist economics that Lyndon LaRouche and Lynn Marcus developed. He didn't get it. And many videos of Michael Parenti, he goes on and on about capitalism just wants more and more. It wants endless growth. And I'm sitting there watching this going, no, it doesn't. They want to beat down the productive forces. They have whole think tanks promoting Malthusianism. No, they don't. They want to stay at the top. That's what they want. They want all the profits to go to them, but they don't want endless growth. But that's nuance, and that's, Michael Parenti's awesome, but on a very important point, are you for growth or degrowth? Michael Parenti, you're not going to get an understanding of why imperialism is all about degrowth and why growth is the nature of anti-imperialism. You're not going to get that from Parenti. You're not, right? Well, that's okay. He does so much good work on so many other good questions. I'm not going to throw Parenti in the toilet. Parenti was a good guy, but on one very important question that is really the pinnacle of the linchpin of our innovationist turn that has broken us away from being communists and all of that. The pro-growth, poverty is not socialism, to be rich is glorious, right? Abundance for all. You're not going to get that from Parenti. You're going to get capitalism is bad because it needs endless growth. That's what you're going to get from Parenti. Well, he's wrong. But Parenti is still amazing. And am I throwing out my Parenti books? No. Right? Parenti was a good guy who was wrong on one question. Chomsky, it looks like, was a bad guy, but his bad guy job was controlling anti-war leftism and controlling anti-imperialism. And so in order to do that job effectively, he had to write books full of true things. Can we understand this? Do we get it, folks? Do we get it? Right? We have to understand that the world is a complicated place. There are very few people in this world that are all good and all bad. We're all bad. And in fact, often the differences between people, and this is something that is a tough pill for some people to swallow. A lot of times the differences between people, it's not a question of good versus bad. It's a question of big versus small. Big people do really big good, but when they do bad, it's really bad. And big people, when they do really, really bad things, in order to get away with those bad things, they have to do good stuff to get people to trust them, right? I mean, Hitler, the mass murdering dictator of Germany, would never have been able to do all the evil things he did if he didn't fix the German economy, right? If he didn't build the Autobahns and if he didn't provide universal employment and make Germany's economy really jump in the first years of his leadership. He did it through degrowth methods, but if he hadn't stabilized the German economy, he never would have been trusted enough to do World War II and the Holocaust and all the evil shit that he did, right? He had to do some good things and provide universal employment and stabilize the economy in order to do the evil that he did, right? And Stalin, right? Stalin, raised Russia up from nothing. Stalin built, the USSR into a modern country, but, there were a lot of people that got the death penalty. There were a lot of gulags. There were a lot of awful things. And those awful things we shouldn't pretend they weren't awful, right? Stalin did shit I would not do in my worst nightmare, right? And we shouldn't pretend that Stalin was Mr. Nice Guy and, sugar and spice and everything nice. And that's a point that I make in this upcoming book, that, Stalin was a meanie. Stalin was a nasty guy. And a lot of people, he was in situations, but he was doing what he thought was necessary to make Russia into a superpower, to defeat the Nazi invasion that killed 27 million of their people. We shouldn't pretend that Stalin was not somebody who did things that we hope in a million years we never even have to hear about someone that we know experiencing, right? Stalin, in order to do what he did, had to be very, very ruthless, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise, right? Stalin did amazing things. He lifted a country that was an agrarian, impoverished country into a superpower. He defeated the Nazis. He invented space travel. He electrified and he took what was an impoverished country and he made it a strong, powerful, modern country. And he lifted more people up from poverty than you can imagine. The global movement against colonialism expanded in mass because of Stalin. But along the way, in order to deal with some of the most ruthless enemies a country or a nation can have, Stalin had to do lots of ruthless, awful things. And everybody admits that in 1936 and 37, a lot of innocent people ended up in gulags who shouldn't have been there. A lot of innocent people got executed in the panic, the Great Terror, Yezhovshchina. So let's not pretend. Let's not pretend that these were not hard times, and that the world is nuanced. The world is nuanced. The world is nuanced and it's complicated. Okay. And that we can look at Noam Chomsky and say, okay, this was a guy who was assigned by American intelligence to gatekeep anti-imperialist thought. And in the process, he taught a lot of people about anti-imperialism. Okay. He did. But he did it to make sure somebody else didn't, who would have done a better job. And he did it while whispering, don't boycott Israel. Don't look into 9/11. Don't look into the JFK assassination. He did it while then flip-flopping as soon as Obama took office. That's that. All right. The last thing I want to talk about before I start answering questions is this. This rally is happening, right? I saw this going around Twitter. I don't know what it is. And I have asked around. I have called various people. I'm not going to list every person I've called, but I've called various people to try and find out what this rally is. I still can't find out what it is. If anybody knows what this rally is, I'm just going to put the graphic on the screen. It's supposed to be in Washington, D.C. on March 15th, right? If anybody knows what this rally is and who's organizing it, send me information. I'm trying to find the graphic here. I just want to know what it is. It's the kind of thing that, I've been saying over and over that dissident MAGA is the most important community right now. The people who voted for Trump but are disappointed with his politics, they are the most important community in American politics right now, right? Very much so, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, who condemned the ICE killing, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, right? This is the most important constituency, right? So I've seen this poster going around for this rally, March for Justice on March 15th. Here, I'll put it on the screen. If anybody knows who is organizing this rally, what's happening, please email me, calebmaupin@gmail.com, all one word, or message me or something. I want to know if this rally is actually happening. I have seen this all over Facebook. I've seen people sharing it. Cynthia McKinney tweeted this out. If this March for Justice, March 15th, Washington, D.C., and across the United States, take back American sovereignty, hold leaders accountable for treason. It's up to the people now, left and right, united. This looks like something right up our alley in CPI. But I can't figure out, and we've been scouring the internet trying to figure out who in the world is organizing this. So if you can find out any information about this march And if it's actually happening, do they have a permit? Who's putting it on? Let me know, right? I'm investigating. It looks really important, right? This could be awesome. And it's being blasted across the internet, but I don't see a location in DC. I'm not seeing a coalition or an organization putting it together. I can't verify that any permits have been registered. So if you know anything about this rally, let me know, right? I mean, it looks really awesome. Okay. All right. So on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. We got Penny out in Minnesota. Be safe, Penny. It was so great hanging out with you. Best wishes on everything. We got Mr. Charles. Good to see you, Mr. Charles. Names and locations. John McCarthy in Chicago. I salute you, sir. Ryan in Kansas City. I salute you, sir. St. David's, Bermuda. I salute you, St. David. Jacquette in Connecticut. Charles in Brooklyn. Fred from Alameda County. Gabby in Chicago. Good to see you, Gabby. John in Florida. Good to see you, John. Patch in Arizona. Good to see you, Patch. Good to see you. Michael, I owe you a visit, brother. I'm back in town. I'm exhausted, but I need to come see my brother, Michael. Good to see you, Michael. Hope you're doing well. Best wishes on your recovery. I cannot wait to come visit you once again. Michael's a good friend. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Scott in Pennsylvania. Good to see you, Scott. Sorry, I said your name like that. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Anybody? Jacob in Wisconsin. Anybody else? Huey Long from the South. Anthony in Detroit. Good to see you, good sir. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Good to see you. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. All right. Harry in Michigan. Good to see you, Harry. Andre in Monaco. Are you actually in Monaco? That's pretty cool. Right? Ian in the Yukon. Good to see you, Ian. Good to see you. Anybody else? All right. So we're going to get through. There were a couple questions that were sent while I was traveling, and those are appreciated, and you deserve an answer just like everybody else. So yeah, I guess we've got a few coffees that have come in. And we have a couple Rumble rants that have come in as well, which is good. So if you've got, Reverend Dasse is watching. Very good. Good to see you. Dasse in New York. Dustin in Colorado. Good to see you. Anybody else? Yeah, good to see you. All right. So just a quick reminder, if you have a question, Robert in New Jersey, go subscribe to his channel, by the way. Great guy. If you have a question, right, we're still taking questions. The best way to send it is via Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your question. But you can also send Rumble rants, and you can also cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. Okay. So now we're going to start answering people's questions. So the first one that came in was from William Chandler. Thank you again, Caleb Maupin, for all your hard work on behalf of the downtrodden. It's getting harder to find you on Buy Me a Coffee app because I don't have my own account and the spammers are trying to block you. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Chandler. Good luck to you and your campaign in Tennessee. Chandler lives in Tennessee. He's come on this channel before. He's a veteran, and he is running as an anti-war candidate for office in Tennessee. And, we wish him the best. Connected him with a CPI member and friend named Jeff Young, who lives in Kentucky, has also run for office on an anti-war platform. We don't support any candidates in CPI, right? We do not campaign for anybody. We don't make contributions. But there are people in our organization who do run for office, and I'm cool with that. Chandler's not a member of our organization. He's just a guy who is anti-war. I don't believe he's joined CPI yet, but he's a good dude. And so is Jeff Young, and so is a lot of people. We attract great people. We really, really do. So thank you, Chandler. Now, Stacy bought a coffee. Have you read, I have heard you describe fascism as an economic system. I have read Henry Wallace describe fascism as a merger of government with corporations and a corporate state. Is that consistent with the economic system of fascism that you describe, or is Henry Wallace describing something different? Asks Stacy. Very good question, Stacy. So when people say that fascism is a merger of government and corporate power, that is a misreading. Mussolini, who originated the word fascism, he was the dictator of Italy. He came up with an economic theory called corporatism. And so people hear corporatism, right? And they think that that's what that means. And that, this is just a mistranslation, a confusion, right? The corporate, or the corporate state, is part of the fascist economic theory. Mussolini said, we don't need to have socialism or communism. What we'll have private companies, but these private companies will be managed by a corporate or corporate body that will include workers. It'll include the administration, the owners of the company, and it'll include the fascist party. And that's what Mussolini's Italy did, is that the major companies in Italy were managed by government agents, basically. And the CEO of the company and somebody from the fascist union, they outlawed all the non-fascist unions. Somebody from the fascist union and somebody from the Mussolini government would sit down and kind of direct the company, right? That's what the corporate state meant. Right. That's the corporate state. And it was still a private company, still making profits, but you have a government manager and a labor union person managing it along with the corporation. And that's Mussolini's economic theory of the corporate state. If you want to read about it, there's actually a good book I have on the shelf by Togliatti, right? Palmiro Togliatti was the leader of the Italian Communist Party, and he went into exile in the Soviet Union, and he gave lectures about the economics of fascist Italy that are fascinating, where he talks about how Italy was constantly adjusting its economic model. On paper, Italian fascism was supposed to be something like what China is today, where you have a lot of companies that are private, but they're all being forced to work in the interest of an overall plan. That's what it's supposed to be, but it's not, right? It wasn't like that. It was like an authoritarian capitalist state. And throughout, from 1922, when Mussolini took power, all the way up until the end of World War II, they were constantly adjusting and changing their economic model. It was a heavy-handed Bonapartist government, and they didn't live true to their own economic theories. Now, Henry Wallace was vice president of the United States, and Henry Wallace frequently referred to Nazi Germany and Italy. He referred to them as the devil's own religion of darkness. He kind of demonized them in very vague populist language, and he emphasized that they preached racial supremacism and bigotry. But he didn't really give a scientific understanding of fascism. I have said time and time again that if you want to understand the economics of fascism, I would recommend that you read Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt. That book goes into great detail about how, when you have a crisis of overproduction, you need a heavy-handed state to forcibly drive down productive forces to get the economy going. That's what fascism is. Fascism is the liberal Western countries that have open democratic systems in a long-term economic crisis, collapsing into illiberal authoritarianism and rebooting themselves with degrowth, right? This book, I would recommend it. I also, I unashamedly say one very good book on, that has the same point is this book, Dialectical Economics by Lynn Marcus. This is Lyndon LaRouche. Before he was Lyndon LaRouche, when he was still a Marxist, he called himself Lynn Marcus, and he wrote this very, very good book called Dialectical Economics that makes the same point. There's another book that I've cited before. It's an actual like pro-fascist book, and it's called Into the Darkness by Lothrop Stoddard, who was a white supremacist who was on the board of Planned Parenthood. And as World War II was starting, before America got involved, the Nazis brought him to Nazi Germany to write a book that presented their side of the story. And if you read it, it goes into great detail about the eugenics courts, where they were sterilizing people for being mentally ill or for being political dissidents. And he talks about the degrowth economic policies. But all of this is my book, Where is America Going? The second and third chapters go into great detail about the nature of fascist economics. Fascism is degrowth to save capitalism. It is when you have a crisis of poverty created by abundance, when people are homeless because there's too many houses, when people are hungry because there's too much food, when there's a glut on the market, when technology advances and there's so much wealth, and that should be good, except we have a highly irrational economic system, and that leads to mass poverty. When there's a prolonged economic crisis, a section of the elite will take control of the government and centralize power in their hands, and then use the state to drive down living standards, to impoverish people, to create a slave labor underclass, to prepare for an all-out war. Fascism is an attempt to save capitalism from its own built-in irrational problem. That's what fascism is. And that's not simple, right? And you won't get that in Michael Parenti. As much as I love Michael Parenti's books, you won't get that from him, right? He doesn't go into that much detail, but you will get it from R. Palm Dutt, right? You will get it from R. Palm Dutt and his Fascism and Social Revolution. You will get it from Dialectical Economics by Lynn Marcus. You will get it from Togliatti and his lectures on fascism. You will get that from Lothrop Stoddard, who was a fascist, and you'll get it from me in my book, Where is America Going? Fascism is degrowth. It is Malthusianism instituted with an authoritarian state. It is degrowth to save capitalism from itself. I hope that was a helpful answer to your question, Stacy. Next question. Kim says, I love your patchwork of psyops as an explanation of what's happening in Minnesota. Somalia occupies a very long stretch in the northern eastern of Africa, directly below the Gulf of Aden. Could this be about funneling funds there and creating support and loyalty to the U.S.? I would agree. I think that's very much what's going on there. And with this discovery of this mass fraud, sending ICE agents is a way of distracting, as well as why not use this to train a bunch of our agents and get in your practice anything goes. 3, I wouldn't put it past them the possibility also that many woke people are employed agents of a type themselves. Oh, totally. Right? Everything you said there. So the first point you made about Somalia. Yeah, the USA, I mean, Bill Clinton bombed Somalia in the 90s. You ever see Black Hawk Down? That's about U.S. military intervention in Somalia, right? It's a very popular movie about U.S. aircraft getting shot down in Somalia, right? Israel just declared Somaliland, a big chunk of Somalia, independent, right? Israel broke apart Sudan already, right? South Sudan was part of Sudan, and Israel declared it independent, and it's now occupied by Israeli troops. And they want to break apart the Darfur region, which is another region of Sudan, right? And that's on the coast of Africa, on the same coast that you find Somalia, right? And that Israel in particular is very interested in what goes on in Somalia, because Somalia is right there across from Yemen. It's right there by the Red Sea. It's a very strategic point. And the Houthis were blocking, and stopping Israeli-bound ships in the Red Sea. And it's very important to Israel. It's also very important to America. And that's why we've been bombing Somalia. We've been bombing Somalia since I was like 4 years old. Bill Clinton started it. Bill Clinton bombed Somalia. Bush bombed Somalia. Obama did drone strikes in Somalia. Somalia has been a target of the United States for a long time. And part of the operations there has been bribing people with visas. And making friends, soft power. That's definitely what's going on there. And it appears, though, that Israel doesn't necessarily approve of who the USA has been making friends with. That's one thing. And it's clear that a lot of the people that have been brought into Minnesota, they've been brought in, and the Democrats and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris like them, and Trump doesn't. And I don't know what to say about that. You know, I don't know why. I don't know all the details, but it's clear that there's some kind of operation, a massive operation, not just to bring Somalis to Minneapolis, but also to funnel money to them, $9 billion worth of money to them. And it appears that there's people in the Trump administration who don't approve of this operation. And that's all we know, right? And we can speculate about what it's about, but Somalia is, yes, it is a deeply poor country that is in chaos, and it has been the target of U.S. operations for quite some time, and it's in a very strategic location. That's one point that Michael Parenti made that I thought was a very good point. There are not poor countries, right? I mean, you know, countries in Africa have loads of oil, but the people there are poor because the oil money goes to Wall Street corporations, right? Somalia, you look at it, it should be a wealthy country. It's right there on the Horn of Africa, right there by the Red Sea. It should be wealthy, but the people there are living in some of the most desperately poor conditions of any people in the world. It's a deeply impoverished country. Why? Well, because Somalia is not controlled by Somalis, right? It's kept poor by the imperialists. So there you go, right? And why do you think China's only overseas military base is in Djibouti? That's because China is trying to grow and doesn't want the West controlling them, and so they have to have a base in that area too to make sure that their ships that are bound for China can go through. And again, right? I've been to Djibouti. I've never been to Somalia. The only African country I've been to is Djibouti. And Djibouti is this tiny country. And you look, it's just carved on the map for geopolitical purposes, right? So anyway. Next question that Kim asks is, with this discovery of mass fraud and sending ICE agents as a way of distracting, as well as why not use this to train a bunch of agents? It's that, but it's also, they're mad. Right, about this fraud. They're mad that these Somalis have been brought in, and they're not pro-Israel. They're anti-Israel. Ilhan Omar has been elected to the U.S. Congress, and she is very anti-Israel. She's very anti-Russian also, but she's very anti-Israel. And Ilhan Omar and the Somali community there, they like the Democratic Party. They are Muslims. They are anti-Israel. They've been brought into the country. They've been given visas, and they're being given lots of taxpayer money to use for we don't know what, but probably it's going back to Somalia is what's widely alleged. And I think Trump's mad about that. I mean, maybe not him personally, but the people around him are angry about it, and they want to punish Minnesota, and they wanted to make life hell in Minnesota, and they used ICE to do it, and they did a great job. And again, I was in Minnesota. I remember talking to people that are hardcore Trump supporters that hate ICE being there, that want ICE to leave town, that are terrified. And I'm like, dang, and you guys are like some of the most conservative people. You guys are true Trump supporters. And they're like, yeah, but this is awful. I'm scared if my kids go outside. We can't go to school without fear. I mean, people are, parents are afraid to drive their kids to school, and that there's like a volunteer service of like white people driving people of color's kids to school because they're afraid, and that ICE is doing one thing ICE is doing, fake traffic stops. Right. That's one thing they've been doing. I forgot to mention this. Right. So, if you're driving down the highway and you see blue and red lights, a cop is pulling you over. Right. Well, I guess not. ICE, they're not licensed to make traffic stops. Right. They can't issue you a ticket. But ICE is pretending to be cops and pulling people over so that they can detain them or check their immigration status or jerk them up against the wall and search them and call them pieces of shit. They're just being bullies, right? And that's the other thing. Like ICE is claiming, every time ICE, there's a scandal, there's a video of them punching somebody or something. Oh, we were about to go get a child molester. No, you weren't. No, they weren't. That's a real coincidence, isn't it? Every time ICE gets in trouble, there was a child molester or a rapist or a trafficker in the building. And it's like, yeah, not buying it. There's one too many coincidences, guys. Not buying it, right? They do fake traffic stops. Like, how is that not illegal, right? If I went out on the highway and put a red light and a blue light on my car and started pulling people over, they'd put me away. They'd throw me in jail. They'd say, Caleb, you can't give anybody tickets. You're not a police officer. That's impersonating a police officer. You're going to jail. Well, ICE can't issue traffic tickets, right? If you run a stoplight or you speed, ICE can't do anything about it. So them putting lights on their cars and pretending to be police to pull people over so they can fuck with them, That's illegal. That's completely illegal. And they're doing it all the time. And people don't like it. I wouldn't like that if I was them, and I see it, Kim, my estimation. I mean, we'll know all the details someday. I think they're just trying to punish the city. That's what I think they're trying to do. I think they see this city as a Democrat stronghold. There's an international operation going on that they don't approve of, that the Trump administration doesn't like, that the Democrats and like the liberal CIA are doing, that they don't like, that probably Israel doesn't like either. And they decided they're just going to go to Minneapolis and make lives miserable. There's no reason to send 3,000 immigration agents to one city, right? I mean, there's no reason for that. Absolutely no reason for that. This is the biggest immigration operation in history, but now it's over, right? Now they're de-escalating. They're pulling them out because protesting worked. It pains me to say it, but it worked. Anyway, thanks everybody. You all are cool. All right. Oh, you had one more question. I wouldn't put it past it as a possibility that many woke people are agents of themselves. No kidding, Kim. No kidding. Yeah, all these people that are getting paid. Look, I don't want to say too much, but I got to Minneapolis shortly after the death of Alex Preddy, and at my hotel, I noticed there were a lot of protesters who came to town and were staying at this hotel I was staying in also. And I was like, dang, so you just flew in for the protests? You just flew in? Oh, this is my job. I work for a nonprofit and they support the protests and they flew me in. Oh, really? That sounds real grassroots to me. Yeah. No, loads of those woke people are intelligence, spooks, funded, the foundations that pay for their work. I mean, that's complete. I do want to say this too, while we're on this topic. And look, I don't think that Don Lemon should be buried under the jail. Okay. But what he did was wrong. What Don Lemon did was wrong. It was wrong what Don Lemon did. And I don't care. I don't think it's the worst crime against, I don't think he should go to jail for the rest of his life, but he should be prosecuted. You don't go into people's churches, okay? You don't go into houses of worship and harass people. You don't do that, okay? We have to draw a line somewhere. And you say, well, Caleb, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right. Oh, so we're going to set a precedent now that if you don't like somebody, you don't like what they do for work, you don't like their politics, you can go into their church, disrupt their church service, film their church service without permission. No. Okay, let's throw this out there. You think that's okay? Okay, so, let's say that the pro-Palestine crowd, there's a pro-Israel rabbi, and they don't like him. So they're going to go into the synagogue, and then when he gets to a certain point in his sermon, they're going to stand up and shout "Free Palestine" and wave flags in the synagogue. You think that's okay? You think we would all be okay with that? No, that would be considered an anti-Semitic hate crime. Or the other way around. Let's say the Zionists, they don't like Muslims. They don't like Palestine. So they go to a mosque, and in the middle of the prayer, they get up and unfurl Israeli flags. You think that's okay? No. Houses of worship, stay out. All right. Don't protest in anyone's church, mosque, synagogue, temple. Stay out. Okay. And it offends me on a religious level. Okay. Because it was a church and I am a Christian. And I know that one of the biggest points that Jesus makes in the Bible is that none of us are good enough. None of us. There is not a single one of us that is good enough. And that forgiveness, one of the beautiful things about Christianity is that forgiveness is there for everyone. I don't care if this ICE guy who was at this church, I don't care. It could have been a child molester, could have been Adolf Hitler, anybody. The forgiveness of Jesus and the forgiveness and redemption offered by Jesus Christ's salvation, you could be the worst sinner in the world, but you can repent, right? And that's the beauty of Christianity. So the idea that somebody who is bad, I don't even know much about the guy. I guess he's an ICE. He's bad. Somebody that you think is bad is in the church in a place where they're there to get forgiveness and redemption. And you're walking into their house of worship and shouting, "You're bad. You're right." Wrong. Don't do that. Don't do it. Just don't do it. You can protest outside his house on the sidewalk. You can protest outside his job. You can protest on a public street all you want. Don't go into someone's house of worship and disrupt their church service because you don't like them, you don't agree with them or whatever, right? The worst axe murderer should be able to go to a church and pray for forgiveness for his crime of being an axe murderer. Okay? And it's wrong. And that's one thing, you know, it's interesting. New York City, right? Very, very liberal city. That's one law they really do enforce here. If you go, and there's a reason for this, which is that during the 1980s, ACT UP, which was the the group that wanted more funding for AIDS, the LGBT group that was trying to raise awareness about AIDS, that was one thing that they did, is they went into St. Patrick's Cathedral in downtown, and they tried to protest during the Catholic church services. And they passed a law here in New York City that is illegal. And it's on the books, and the Supreme Court and all that, they've said, you can't disrupt somebody's church service. That's a very serious crime in New York City. Now, what's also interesting, though, is New York City is, in addition to that, New York City is also very strict about churches can't turn people away, which is interesting as well, which most places, that's not the case. Most places, you know, if you show up at the church service and they don't like your face, they can say, get lost. Not in New York City. In New York City, they're a little bit strict that if you are a church, if you are designated as a church in New York City, you can't turn people away unless they're being disruptive or causing a problem, which is also interesting, you know. And if you're a house of worship, a synagogue, a mosque, whatever in New York City, you can't, you know, and you're having a public service, anyone can walk in. And that is also heavily enforced in New York City, which I think is also interesting. It's not like that. And I think that that is related to some drama that went on in the Orthodox Jewish community, right? Because there are a lot of sects of Orthodox Judaism in New York City that don't get along, right? Lubavitch is very big here, and, you know, you have many different sects, and that I think there were issues in the 80s, 70s with certain groups of Orthodox Jews. You know, Orthodox Judaism is very strict. You have to have a beard. You have to dress a certain way. You know, we're talking like, what do they call that? Hasidim, right? Hasidim. Hasidim is very strict, and that some of these temples or synagogues were saying, if you don't have the right beard or you don't, and no, you can't do that, right? You know, and you can't play those games. And so it's actually interesting. New York City is a little bit different than the rest of the country when it comes to that. But yeah, that's one thing. If Don Lemon had done what he did in New York City, he probably would have been arrested on the same day. And I think he should be arrested for doing that. I don't think he should be buried under the jail until the end of time. Okay. You know, it's not like he's not an axe murderer. He's not a rapist and all of that. But you don't disrupt people's church services. You have to draw a line somewhere. You have to draw a line somewhere. Just, it's not okay. Right. And, you know, again, I'm not on doing the red team versus blue team thing. I'm telling you like it is. Don't disrupt people's church services. Don't disrupt synagogues. Don't disrupt mosques. Don't disrupt temples. Leave people's houses of worship alone. Okay. All right. Next question. All right. Someone bought a coffee. Someone. So Jelani's gonna overrun Kurdistan. Expect Kurds to whine and bitch about being betrayed again. I'm just reading the question. I didn't say that. Okay. You never hear the end of the betrayal of the Kurdish diaspora. Kurds started as a CIA Savak asset in the 70s against Iraq. And the Hmong God talk about Laotian secret war. Okay. Look, the Kurdish thing, I'm just going to comment on this very quickly because you got to be careful. That language that you used there, and the person was anonymous, which you're allowed to be. You got to be careful because, you know, yes, the CIA has backed the Kurds and other ethnic groups you named, but you're talking about ethnicities here. You're not just talking about organizations. You got to be careful with that, right? There are people that are of Kurdish descent that are anti-imperialist. I met Iranian Kurds that love the Islamic Republic, practice Shia Islam. You got to be careful, right? You know, and you know that the way you stated that in your question could come across as an ethnic statement, right? We always be careful. We don't talk about Jews because there are anti-Israel Jews. We talk about Zionists. We talk about Israel. We don't talk about Jews, right? Because there are Jewish people that don't agree with what the so-called Jewish state is doing, right? The same with the Kurds. There are Kurdish people who don't agree with what the Kurdish liberation organizations or whatever the Kurdistan Workers' Party is doing, right? So you got to be careful with that, please, especially if you're going to have me read it out loud. Please be careful, especially with all the expletives and all that. And you listed some other ethnic groups in there that have gotten U.S. support over the years. Okay, but that doesn't make the whole race of people, the whole ethnic group that way. That means certain organizations are that way. You got to be careful with this, right? We don't want to push ethnic bigotry. Now, as far as the Kurds, right, I will say this, right? The Kurdish people, they've suffered, right? And in Turkey especially, they very much suffered. And it's a complicated issue. It's a really complicated issue. You know, the Turkish government has been pretty vicious to Kurds who want to be separate from Turkey. You know, they have. And, you know, in Syria, during the Syrian civil war, you had the Kurdistan, what is it? The Kurdish Liberation Front, or I forget what they called themselves, right? And they were against ISIS, but they were also against the Syrian government. And sometimes they were for the Syrian government and sometimes they weren't. And the CIA started training them and giving them weapons. Okay. And, you know, okay. I mean, you know, whatever. One thing that drove me absolutely crazy is that, you know, I'm not going to denounce and say the Kurdish people don't necessarily have the right to nationhood. Maybe they do. I don't know. Okay. But the CIA was giving them weapons. The CIA was funding them. Right. Which, whatever. One thing I could not stand was that there were loads of these woke people, the people who blow their whistles, the people who with the pink hair and all that, who they don't support Cuba. It's a dictatorship. They don't support Venezuela. Oh, I heard it's a dictatorship. They don't support China. They don't support Russia. They call themselves socialists and communists. The only thing they could support was the people getting guns from the CIA. And you look at that and you're like, how do these people look at themselves in the mirror? Every anti-imperialist movement, every socialist communist government in the world, you hate. Except for the one that's getting funded by the CIA. Really? Really? Like, I don't understand how these people can look themselves. Like, is there anything revolutionary about you think you're fighting the system? Like, there's these videos, these DSA groups, they've made like video messages supporting the Kurds, and a couple people that were at Occupy Wall Street died in Syria fighting for the Kurds. And I look at that and I'm just like, really? Really? And I will say that was one thing. You want to talk about intelligence? After Occupy Wall Street, that was one thing I noticed. They never approached me because I'm a tanky or whatever, but that was a big push. A lot of whispering. I know somebody who can help you go to Kurdistan. They were trying to recruit occupiers to go fight. And two of them, I think at least two Occupy Wall Street people died fighting for the Kurds in Syria. So the CIA was basically trying to recruit Occupy Wall Street people to go fight because the Kurds are anarchists. And that's another thing. I'll just say this. I've said this many times in these streams. The Kurds are not anarchists. All right. They're Kurdish nationalists. Right? The Kurds are an ethnic group that, you know, wants their own nation. And they're, you know, and during the 1950s, the Soviet Union was supporting them. And so they were Marxist-Leninist. And then the Soviet Union stopped supporting them. And so they got funding from China and they were Maoists. And then China stopped supporting them and they got funding from Albania. And they were Hojaists, followers of Enver Hoxha. And then Albania collapsed in 1993. And then they became anarchists. And what it really was is they were scraping the barrel. First, they were getting funding from the Soviet Union. That didn't work out. Then they were getting funding from China. That didn't work out. Then they were getting funding from Albania, which there wasn't much money there. Albania is not a very big country. And then they discovered that they could fly in hoity-toity European college professors. They could fly in Noam Chomsky fans from Sweden and Norway and France, and they could come in with their monocles and they could take them to the factory and they could go, oh boy, all the workers have an equal share of the profits in the factory. Yes, it's pure workers' democracy. It's not evil communism like Bakunin and Stalin want. Oh no, this is pure workers' democracy. Look at these great people that are practicing real communism, not like Stalin, not like Mao, but real communism. Yes, here's some of my money. I shall write you a check from my professor's salary. Here you go. Here's $5,000 for the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Woohoo! That's what was going on. And I don't think the Kurds are really anarchists. I think they just have to get money from somebody. And so, when all the Marxist-Leninist money dried up, they started getting European woke college professor money. And the Zapatistas are the same thing. The Zapatistas were a Marxist-Leninist current for Chiapas independence. Chiapas is a region in Mexico. There's indeed indigenous people there, who want to break away from Mexico. And for a while, they were communists, and that didn't work out. And so they've done the same thing. And they're anarchists. I think the Kurds are not anarchists. They're Kurdish nationalists. They're probably socialistic to some degree or other, but they've learned to mouth the words that liberal college professors say, and they write them checks. The same for the Zapatistas. The Zapatistas are not anarchists. They were communists, but they're Chiapas indigenous nationalists. And for a while, they learned to say what would get them money from communists. And it didn't work out. And so now they're saying what would get them money from liberal college professors. And that's what's going on there. Okay. And I think that they're socialistic, right? I'm sure they want, a planned economy. They want to take care of the people there. And they are fighting for the people of Chiapas. And they learn to mouth different things, from different people who support them. And the same for the Kurds. Look, Murray Bookchin. There was an anarchist writer who lived in New York City, an obscure anarchist writer named Murray Bookchin. That's who the Kurds, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, claims to follow. You really, really think that a political party that has millions or thousands of members at least in the Middle East, in Turkey, in a Muslim country, with an armed militia, you really think that of all the ideologies they're going to follow in the world to guide their movement, they're going to discover an anarchist pamphleteer in New York City and adopt his ideology? Really? You really think that that's real? You think that's genuine and serious? That they used to be Maoists, they used to be Marxist-Leninists, they used to be Hojists, and then they became followers of anarchist, elderly Jewish anarchist guy from New York City. Really? You really think that they're not shitting you? You really think that? Do you know who Murray Bookchin was? They're like, they're great, that they're following the ideology of this elderly, dead, guy from New York City. You really think that's the case? They're really following Murray Bookchin? Really? You really think they're following Murray Bookchin? I don't. I don't buy it for 1 minute. I don't buy it for 1 minute. I think they're really good at giving those French and Swedish and German college professors who are woke CIA leftists tours to show them what they want to see and open their checkbooks. That's what it really is. That's my opinion of the Kurds. Okay. And look, they have the right to do it as a people that is, I'm not going to say they're not a nation. I know there are some Kurds that feel they are not a nation, but some do. And I'm going to be careful here. Look, CIA money was given to Fidel Castro at the beginning. And then look what happened. So just because somebody gets CIA backing doesn't mean they're bad forever. Okay. But the leftists in America who can't bring themselves to support any actual anti-imperialists, but the CIA gives them money, that's crazy. And I will say it was a little scary how Occupy Wall Street people were being recruited to go fight for the Kurds. And a couple of them died. And that's also scary and weird, right? But it was being whispered, hey, you want to go? I mean, they never approached me because I'm Mr. Tanky RT or whatever, but a lot of people that I knew through the Occupy Wall Street networks were being recruited to go fight in Syria. And that's creepy and scary and sad too. I mean, a couple of them died. So anyway, PayPal just debanked Gray Zone. I saw that. Absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I mean, I'm banned from PayPal also. I got banned on the same day that Mint Press got banned. There were news articles about it. I guess they finally got to Gray Zone. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. So absolutely wrong. Okay. All right. So now, oh wow, we have a lot of Rumble rants that have come in. So we'll do the Rumble rants next, and then we'll end because it's almost midnight and I got to get up early for something tomorrow. I've had a busy day and I've got a busy tomorrow. I guess that's what happens when you're on the road for a little while. You got to come back and catch up on everything. Epstein Files talks about someone eating a baby, but redact the name. Yeah, that's weird as hell. A lot of the Pizzagate stuff is confirmed, right? They're talking about cheese pizza, which everyone says is code for child pornography, CP, and the, Pizzagate, right? That's one thing. Ben Swan has done some great reporting about how, Pizzagate, it looks like Pizzagate, we're back to Pizzagate, right? Pizzagate is back. And yeah, there's some really evil, nasty, scary, gross, horrific stuff in the Epstein files. You were absolutely right, Hempcar. And you got the link, if people want to see the link in the chat for the Epstein files. I'm not going to put it on here because I don't want to give you all nightmares. Reminder that Bukele is no Ortega. Bukele is awful. I mean, I hoped that Bukele would be good, but Bukele is awful. One thing I saw in Los Angeles that I thought was weird is in LA when I was out there, there's a Bukele fan store, like in downtown LA. It's like a store that just sells shirts with Bukele on them and the flag of El Salvador. That was pretty weird. But I really hoped that Bukele would be good, but nah. Now, Left is Best sent a very generous super chat and said, great explanation of Chomsky's history, mindset, and purpose. Well, you're very, very welcome. I appreciate the super chat. Very generous, $50, much appreciated. There we go. Thoughts on James Fishbeck? The guy seems a racist Mamdani. He calls his opponent. I've never heard of this guy. James Fishbeck. I've never heard of him. Let me Google him. James Fishbeck, the fourth generation Floridian to succeed DeSantis as Florida's next Republican governor. So he's running for governor of Florida. He's a Republican, and people are saying he's racist. Okay, well, let me Google him. James Fishbeck. I haven't followed this guy. James Fishbeck, American investor, hedge fund manager, CEO of Arizona Partners, and he's running for governor of Florida in 2026. Business career, hedge fund manager. Okay. Was a strong supporter of Ron DeSantis. He's linked to Nick Fuentes. Oh, he's a Nick Fuentes candidate. He calls himself a Groyper. Interesting. Tucker Carlson is supporting him. Well, Tucker Carlson does a lot of good things, so that complicates things. But I generally don't like anything Nick Fuentes touches. I'm not feeling good about him. Not feeling good about him, but okay. He wants Don Lemon publicly executed. That's horrible. Again, I don't agree with what Don Lemon did, and I do think he needs to be prosecuted for what he did. You shouldn't go into people's churches. That said, executed, really? And that's the problem. This is years of lead shit, right? Well, he's on the other team. He should get killed, right? No, actually. No. No. And if you're on the right and you're celebrating the death of Alex Preddy, stop it. Stop it. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping America. Stop it, right? You can say, I agree with immigration crackdowns and not agree with that, okay? And if you're on the left and you celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk, stop it. Stop it, right? You can say, I don't agree with Charlie Kirk, but you don't have to say that a father with kids deserved to die. Stop it, right? We need to stop celebrating bad things happening to people, especially bad things done by the government, just because we don't agree with the person, right? And celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk was evil. Celebrating the death of Alex Preddy was evil, right? Celebrating the death of Ashley Babbitt was evil, right? Just don't, right? It's not edgy. It's not radical. It's dumb. And you're hurting America by doing it, because anybody on the other side is going to be traumatized by you doing that. It's not okay. Look, this is a big problem. And this has been going on for years, right? Like, great example of this, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Their belief system is that anyone that is a fascist deserves to die. And then they tell all their members and have tweeted out all over social media that our organization, CPI, is fascist. So they're calling for our murder. Is that okay? No. Right? Generally, killing people because you disagree with them or celebrating people's deaths because you disagree with them is not a cool thing to do, right? I don't understand why is that so hard for people to understand? It's the internet. It's like people say things on the internet they wouldn't say in real life. It kind of makes interactions anonymous, but generally you shouldn't celebrate other people's deaths, no matter what they believed. That's my belief. All right. Okay. All right. I did Fishbeck already. MSM is trying to blame Epstein operation on Russia. That's so stupid. The Epstein story has been out there for the longest time, and now that it's unavoidable, this is mainstream media, and I don't want to be negative here. I want to get back into a positive mode. But it's like, first of all, one thing that annoys me is there's a lot of people who are like anti-Trump liberals that 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, if you just said anything about Epstein, they would have gone, that's not real. That's a conspiracy theory. Epstein, that's something you heard on RT or on InfoWars. There's no such thing as an Epstein. Stop spreading right-wing conspiracy theories. And you would have shown them that Jeffrey Epstein was a real guy, and they would have said, no, stop with your propaganda. And they would have denied that any of it was real. Well, now that Epstein is out there and there's some things pointing to Trump. Oh, Epstein, Trump is a pedophile. And it's like, they're not wrong that Trump is, there's a lot there that points to Trump with the Epstein thing. They're not wrong. But it's like they wouldn't have cared. And so now that it's out there, that Epstein is unavoidable and they're pointing fingers at Trump, there's got to be a way they can not blame Israel and not blame the American political establishment. So now, how long has this Epstein shit been out there, right? And people have been talking about it. Now that the documents are out there, all the evil stuff is there for us all to see. Now they're like, well, maybe it was Russia. All right. Okay. All right. It couldn't be Israel. Couldn't be America. Definitely couldn't be the Democrats. Maybe it was Russia. Okay. All right. All right. And the sad thing about it is that, I will defend Russia. And I know most of you watching this will. But that there's somebody out there who just doesn't know anything. And they're going to be sitting at the dinner table. And one of their smart liberal friends who just watched NPR is going to be sitting there. And he's going to go, and Epstein worked for Russia. And this person who doesn't have the courage or the knowledge that you and I have is going to say, are you sure Epstein worked for Russia? And they're going to say, are you defending Putin? Are you defending Putin? And they're going to say, oh, no, I would never defend. I guess Epstein worked for Russia. It's like you create this atmosphere where it's like we all have to agree that Putin is bad. So you could accuse Putin of, I don't know what, you could say that Putin was responsible for the crimes of Genghis Khan, and I would say, well, Genghis Khan lived 1,000 years ago. I'm not sure. Oh, are you defending Putin? Oh, no, I would never defend. And that's how this game is played, right? And it's like, yeah, that no one bothers to fact check anything. There's just, no, we've all agreed this is a bad guy, Putin, which he's not a bad guy. He's a genius, actually. And he saved Russia from the nightmare of the fall of the Soviet Union. But American media, we're all supposed to think he's a bad guy. And if you question anything they say about him, are you defending a bad guy? Are you spreading Russian propaganda? So, I guess Russia. It's so absurd. It's so absurd. Absolutely absurd. Next question. Putin said he was going to save the world from the demonic West. Well, he's doing it. He's doing the best he can. And he was right. I mean, you look, some of the stuff he said about Epstein, I mean, he was not wrong in what he said. He was not wrong in what he said at all. Not wrong in what he said in any way. And now we have a question that came in from Gabby. There's been a recent shooting in Chicago involving heavy firearms and many other incidents that are considered black on black crime. Despite gun laws, this violence continues. I've heard reports of gang members coming in to take down ICE. How do we dismantle these gangs and address the cycles that lead young people into this life? How can we work toward a safer, stronger community where these tragedies don't happen? Do you think building stronger communities needs to start at home? Well, look, I think generally speaking, people don't become drug dealers. People don't become terrorists if they have economic opportunity. If there's an opportunity to do a job that won't involve you getting shot, that will be much more stable, where you'll have, people don't tend to turn to this. Now, that's not the fix-all, right? There are problems that, I'm going to let the black community address. I'm not going to talk down to the black community and tell them what their problems are. But, I'm sure that many other people in the black community will say, okay, Caleb, you're right about economic opportunity, but there are some other issues. Not for me to say, but I think economics is the foundation of it, right? And that in Chicagoland, which is huge, that's one thing I liked about Minneapolis. Everything in Minneapolis is right next to anything that's in the Minneapolis area is close. Not so with Chicago. Chicagoland is huge, right? But Minneapolis is very close together. But there are a lot of impoverished African American folks in the Chicago area. And I think probably like the most basic thing that would be done to cure the gang problem would be economic opportunity. Now, are there other issues? Probably. And that's not for me to address. That's for other people in the black community to address. But look, Uhuru, their Black Power Blueprint, they're doing amazing stuff. Uhuru, again, this new book I'm writing, you're going to love it. You are going to love this new book that I have just written. You're going to really, really love it, because in this book, I go into great detail about a lot of things. Uhuru comes up in the book, and yeah, you're going to like this new book that I wrote. All right, folks. Well, it's almost midnight, and I am running out of steam here, and I have to get up early in the morning for something I'm doing tomorrow morning. So I wish you all the best. If you want to send a question for me to do on my next stream, buy me a coffee. You can buy me a coffee, and you can do those when I'm not on air. So if you're watching this tomorrow and you want me to answer another question, buy me a coffee, please. It would be appreciated. But I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to put on the closing music. I will try to be back tomorrow night. I'm going to try to stream as much as I can to make up for all the time I was gone, because that's why I really missed streaming, and I'm really glad to be back. Watch out for the Academic Agent episodes. Tomorrow I'm going on Praise of Folly podcast. Also, I've got that lined up. So if you're a fan of Praise of Folly, you can watch that as well. That's a podcast that's part of the Attack the System universe and stuff. It's a guy named Todd, but it's Keith Preston and stuff like that. So I'm going on that tomorrow. So tune in for that. And I'll probably stream tomorrow night. So, all right, everybody. Good night. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.